Morning, members of the public. Have we got an echo somewhere? We have we? No? I can hear it. Okay. Welcome to the D&M meeting for March. I'll do the safety bits first. In case of the fire alarm going off, exit out through and go out into the car park as far as you can get away from the building. Not expecting the fire alarm to go off, but just to remember that. The toilets are out through that door on the left. There's water, hopefully, I don't know if there's containers for it, out on the right. This is a public meeting, and members of the public are welcome to listen to the debate today, but unless you're registered to speak, you're not able to take part in the proceedings. We are live webcasting today, so can I please remind members to use their microphones and remember to turn them off when not speaking. And whilst I'm at it, make sure your mobile phones are on silent, please. In terms of how the items are going to be presented, the case officer will present their report, the objector will speak, the supporter will speak, the parish council representatives will speak, and the ward member will speak. That's if they are here. We have several gaps today. Members will be able to question each speaker on points of clarity. At the conclusion of the debate on each application, the members will vote and come to a decision. I would now like to ask the officers to introduce themselves, please. Amelia.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Amelia Bolter. I'm the Senior Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to this committee.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rosemary Rowe. I'm Ward Member for Dartmouth and East Smart, and I am Vice Chair of this committee.
Good morning. I'm Councillor Richard Foss, and I am Chairman of this committee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Fairbairn. I'm Head of Legal Services and Monitoring Officer and the Legal Advisor to the committee this morning.
Good morning, I'm Pat Weimer. I'm Head of Development Management for South Hams.
I'm Charlotte Harrahane. I'm a Senior Planning Officer and the Case Officer for the first two applications today.
Thank you very much. So, in that case, then, Charlotte, would you like to present? Oh, apologies, beg your pardon. I'm jumping it, yeah. Are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We received apologies from Councillors Pringle and Kemp, and Councillors Smurden and O'Callaghan are substituting.
Thank you. To the minutes of the meeting, does the committee agree with the minutes of the meeting? Previous? Okay, thank you. I have no items of chair's business. I'm not aware of any reason to split the agenda. Members, have you any declarations of interest on any of the items that we are addressing this morning? Yes.
I don't know if it's relevant.
Councillor O'Callaghan.
I don't know if it's relevant. Member of the South Hams.
Well, you mentioned, I don't think it'll make any difference, but thank you for that. Any others? Yeah, Councillor Taylor.
I'm a representative for South Hams on A and B, and there was an A and B one in there, I think.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any others? No? Right. Now, Charlotte, would you like to present the first application, which is 4118/22 Full Edgecombe House, West Buckland? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this, before I start, I just want to update members. I just noticed a mistake in the report in paragraph 7.8 where I list the ridge heights of neighbouring properties compared to the application site. Rose Cottage, the ridge height that's listed in the report is actually for their outbuilding, not for the actual house itself. The house is slightly higher, as sort of indicated there. So that's just an update for members before we start. So the site is in West Buckland. Those that were on the site visit will remember Edgecombe House is here and has a long area of residential garden which extends behind 3 or 4 other properties here. The application site is part of this garden and the proposal is for 1 3-bedroom house. Just an aerial view there for you. So you can see the long garden that we're talking about with the proposed house going in here. So just in terms of principle of development, although the site is within Tier 4 in the JLP settlement hierarchy, it is within the Buckland settlement boundary identified in the Thelston Neighbourhood Plan. So the neighbourhood plan supports development within the settlement boundaries. So in terms of principle of development, officers are satisfied that it's acceptable. The neighbourhood plan also goes on to support open market housing, so infill sites, small scale schemes of up to 5 dwellings. Obviously this is a single dwelling, so that accords with that, and also requires that each dwelling is subject to a principal residence requirement. A principal residence has been agreed, and the section 106 is being prepared at the moment to enforce that. So in terms of the site, we've got the house shown here, just as I say, in the existing residential garden area behind the existing houses. Here's just a view looking up the site towards the houses. So the dwelling would be in here. So just in terms of site topography, the site at the moment is sloped. You can see these stumps here just indicating roughly where the house would be. There were some questions when we were on site about whether the dwelling would be dug into the ground or sort of where in terms of the existing ground level it would be. So just to confirm to members, a section was submitted which shows that it's going to be dug into the lower ground level. So it would be about 1.5 metre cut into the existing ground level. You can also see on the elevations, on this north elevation is probably the best one to see it. You can see a dotted line which sort of indicates the existing ground level, just to get an idea of sort of where it would be in relation to the existing topography. So the elevations, you can see it's a fairly traditional 2-storey slate and rendered design. West Buckland is fairly traditional in terms of materials, so conditions are recommended just in terms of the use of the slate, natural stone for the garden wall, things like that. And then we've just got the 2 east and west elevations. I think one thing to bear in mind when I talk about neighbour amenity in a minute, the east elevation would be facing one of the dwellings which has raised concerns about amenity. These windows are conditioned, it's proposed to condition that they're obscure glazed because they serve a plant room and a bathroom, so that would prevent any neighbour amenity issues. So the site is within the A1B, the undeveloped coast and the heritage coast, so fairly sensitive in terms of landscape designations. However, as members saw on site, it would be quite obscured, so the road level is up in line with these houses. So in terms of views from the road through the village, you might get glimpses of the dwelling, but it's not going to be readily seen. And then looking the other way, there's quite a substantial amount of tree screening. And given the kind of the proximity, it would be within the existing cluster of built form of the village. So we're satisfied that the impact on the landscape designations is acceptable. So in terms of neighbour amenity, we have had objections from the 3 dwellings that are surrounding the site. Various sort of neighbour amenity issues raised, so sort of overbearing, overlooking, things like that. So on the slide you can see the distances from each of the neighbouring dwellings to the application site, all of which exceed the distances that are sort of indicated as acceptable by the SPD. And in terms of sort of overbearing and height difference, again, as you remember on site, the application site is quite a bit lower than the houses behind. So this is just a section looking sort of from the bottom of the valley sort of up to the houses behind. And again, these figures indicate the height of the ridge of each neighbouring property compared to the house itself. I did mention this on Monday, but this is just indicative because this window here has now changed. So this wouldn't be an approved plan, but it just gives members an idea of the relationship between neighbouring properties. This is just a view from the rear garden of Rose Cottage, which we went to have a look at. So again, you know, there's quite a bit of screening here, bearing in mind it's, you know, the vegetation isn't as green and full as it will be. There are glimpsed views into the site, but this isn't considered to be harmful in terms of neighbour impact. And again, looking towards Abbottscott, members will remember that there's trees have been planted. There's quite significant vegetation between the two. And again, given the orientation and the distance, officers don't consider that the impact of this dwelling will be harmful. Flood risk was mentioned on Monday, so I just thought I'd show a map. So the flood zone is in blue down towards this stream, but obviously the site's up here, so isn't considered to have any flood risk issues. The Environment Agency were consulted and have no objections. And again, with trees, the trees immediately at the bottom of the site aren't protected, but the ones the other side of the stream are. There's no impact on any trees because of where the dwelling is sited. And again, the tree officers reviewed the application and has no objections. So just to summarise, the site is within the settlement boundary, so the neighbourhood plan supports the principle of development subject to a 106 securing principal residency. The scale and design is acceptable, with the finer details being secured by condition. Landscape impact is considered acceptable for the reasons I've been through, so the topography and the screening. In terms of neighbour impact, the distances are acceptable. There's been minimal openings put in deliberately on the north elevation, which faces the houses, with obscure glazing to the east elevation. And in terms of highways, there's an existing access. There's parking provision proposed, which meets the SPD requirements. And the recommendation is therefore conditional approval subject to the completion of the Section 106.
Thank you very much. Members, have you any questions? And remember, it's questions and not debating at the moment. Councillor Brazil.
Thank you, Chairman. Just interested in the ecology. Could you give a rough outline of the steps that would be taken in order to mitigate the loss of biodiversity?
So when you say loss of biodiversity,
yeah, I mean it's essentially a meadow, and you're
it's a garden. Yeah, so the application has been a preliminary ecological appraisal was submitted. There is so I just refer to the report because ecology were consulted. They're happy subject to conditions. So there's a pre-commencement condition recommended for a construction environmental management plan, which would include a mitigation strategy. So subject to that pre-commencement condition, ecology are happy.
Okay, and that's a pre-commencement condition. And,
yes.
And who will that go through? Just out of interest.
So the details will be submitted to us as the local planning authority, and then we would send it back to our ecology consultant to comment on it.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, Councillor Brazil, at the moment the ecology consultants we're using is the ecologists at Devon County Council, and I don't see that that's going to change in the near future.
Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chairman. Just two questions. Councillor Brazil raised one. There wasn't a lot of emphasis in the ecology report about bats, but there were comments about sort of transect lines. I'm a bit concerned that the ecology report was not as comprehensive as I would have expected about bat flight lines along a valley, which obviously, you know, that habitat is extremely good for bats, and there wasn't an emphasis about the impact. And I know one of the previous applications that was withdrawn had an outbuilding which was withdrawn from this application, which was considered as being either a roost for bats and the flight lines, but there's nothing addressing the potential impact on that within the ecology report.
Again, I've deferred to our ecology consultant, and they've reviewed the report. They were satisfied. Obviously, again, you know, there is quite a lot of information that's going to be required pre-commencement. You know, I don't feel that as case officer I have the knowledge to override the ecology consultant. If he's happy, I'm happy.
The other question, there seems an anomaly in the report which has been picked up by others, where you talk about although some in housing mix 2.3, although some objections stated that the dwelling is a 4 or 5 bedroom property, and then you go on, it's a 3 bedroom property, but then you also say the previously withdrawn application included more bedrooms and was not supported by the officers. I can't find an application which actually talks of anything more than 3 bedrooms. All of the ones that have been withdrawn all had 3 bedrooms.
So the previous application that was withdrawn last year had 4 bedrooms, but the outbuilding that's now not part of this application was proposed to be a kind of a study ancillary space. So when you apply the SPD guidance, that was in addition to the bedrooms within the house, whereas now the study has been moved into the house. So that's the difference in the numbers.
Just so I've got it straight,
Yeah.
that the outbuilding which was within the withdrawn was classed as a bed, potentially a bedroom.
No, so that was the study. So when we're looking at bedroom numbers, in the SPD says you can have X amount of bedrooms and 1 study, and we won't count that study towards bedroom numbers. But if, for example, you had 3 bedrooms, but then you had a study and then an office, then we would count one of those as a potential bedroom, because the SPD says you can have 1 home working room, I'll call it. So because in the previous application, the home working room was cited in the ancillary outbuilding, then all the rooms that had potential to be a bedroom in the house had to be counted as bedrooms, because they'd essentially used their quota of home office rooms in the outbuilding. But because that bit's now not part of the new application that we're considering today, then the study is contained within the house, so they can still have the 1 study home working room.
Right.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Councillor Smerdon?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was interested in the design. It appears to be half. It's sort of slate hung, actually, all the way around, which to me seems a bit unusual for a brand new house. But is this part of the? Is this the local vernacular? Are there lots of slate hung houses? I wasn't able to get to the site visit, but if it is, then fair enough.
As I said, there is a variety in materials in the village, but they are all fairly traditional. And personally, I think the slate hanging kind of breaks up the massing a bit, having the 2 different materials. So yeah, we would condition details of the slate to make sure it's like local natural slate. But yeah, happy with that.
Fair enough.
Okay, all questions? Councillor Long?
Just one, and I suspect it's not one for you, Charlotte. It is, I suspect, for the agent as to why the slate and why. One of the things I picked up on is there's nothing to do with ecology. So although it's slate hung, they haven't included bat access for it, which would be a logical. So I'm assuming that you would prefer that. I ask the agent.
Yeah, I mean, I consider what's in front of me. So if you want to talk about why they didn't consider various alternatives, I think that would need to be a question for them. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Callaghan?
Thanks. Yeah, just to go back to what Councillor Long was asking, just to clarify the housing, the bedroom situation, it was said that in the previous application there was separate, which was withdrawn or whatever, there was a separate study proposed in the garden. And how many bedrooms were in the house originally, as well as the study?
So the previous application was a 4-bed house plus a study. This is now 3-bed plus a study.
Yeah, but they could apply. It could be applied later on for. You can apply for stuff in your own garden separately, can't you?
Well, you can, but that would be that you it's proposed to remove permitted development rights. So any further proposals would have to be submitted. We'd then consider that at the time. We can't refuse this because they might do something different in the future.
Yeah. When you say remove permitted rights, does that mean you can't build another study in your garden?
Yeah. So it means So there would be no permitted development rights for building any outbuildings in the garden or extending the house, things like that.
That means you can't, or
it means you have to apply for planning permission to do it. So not that you can't, but it's just normally under permitted development people could just do it without planning permission. But if we remove the permitted development rights, they'd have to come in and apply so that we can consider whether it's okay or not.
Okay, thanks.
You know, just remind you that we can only consider what is before us. It doesn't matter what we think might happen in the future. We've just got to deal with what we're dealing with now today. Okay. Okay. In that case, if you finish with the questions, yes, Councillor Taylor.
This is quite near the stream. Foul drainage.
Yeah, so foul drainage is going into the existing sewer, which South West Water are happy with.
Right, thank you. In that case, then we will move. We don't have an objector, so the next speaker will be James Wells, supporter. Sir, if you'd just like to sit down, settle yourself in, and switch on the mic, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. The officer report, I think, sets everything out. So rather than repeat that, I just wanted to reiterate that we've worked quite hard, really, to overcome previous objections to the scheme. And hopefully, from the site visit, you could see that what we've done has tried to be sensitive to the neighbours, tried to reflect what exists locally. But I think everything's been covered, so I'm happy just to take questions that you may have.
Members, do you have any questions of the supporter? Yes, Councillor Long.
I'll bring up one of the things. You've obviously gone for slate to the first floor covering. It's not that typical of the village, is it? Slate hung. Why did you choose slate hanging? When you look around, most of the houses are rendered. I think I know why, but it'd be good to hear from you.
So slate hanging really was, well, we do see it in part of the village as far as I'm aware. It's traditional to the South Hams, and it helps, we think, just to ground the building to try and reduce the apparent mass. That's the main reason.
Given that you're using slate, that slate hung buildings are good habitat for bats, and I'm surprised that no facility was placed in there either with to allow bat access to either the slate hung or the roof space.
So in the ecology report, one of the suggestions for mitigation is that we put bat tubes. So that would be something that we would look to incorporate along with other measures, basically, but we haven't finally decided what we want to do on that, but it's available for that purpose.
Chairman, can I ask, because obviously there's a comment there that other things may be considered, and I'm just wondering where that comes within any potential conditions, because obviously we're saying the ecology report, but there's an indication of bat tubes as such, but other enhancements, particularly in that area, given the sensitivity of it, could be beneficial. How can we address that?
If we're talking about mitigation for potential impact on ecology, then I think that that's already covered by the condition that Charlotte's already mentioned in terms of a construction and ecology management plan. So I think though, seeking that mitigation. So I think if it's things like either bat tubes, bird boxes, bat slates, I think all of those could be incorporated in that condition, and there wouldn't be, there's be no problem with us dealing with it as part of that condition. I think the only issue would be, and I don't envisage it happening, but if, for argument's sake, part of the mitigation was to erect a building for a bat roost, and that building itself required planning permission, you can't grant planning permission through the discharge of a condition. But I don't see that as being a limiting factor here, given the mitigation that's likely to be required.
Thank you. So specifically, if as agent you bring forward those additional mitigation measures, they would be included within the CMP?
That's correct.
One other question that I have is there have been some comments about the size of the property being 3-bedroom and how it's slightly contrary to, and you have a lot of comments there, contrary to the neighbourhood plan just by the size of the property. And obviously part of the pre-app discussion that was had before, there was an indication of a single-storey property. I wonder how you got to the position you have with a 2-storey property of that size.
So what we're trying to do is to provide something that provides a good level of amenity to whoever's got to live in that property. It's a reasonable size, but not overly sized. It also allows for adaptations for later living. So rather than having something that's too small and you can't adapt it easily and you have to move, well, actually, that design allows for that to happen without significant changes, and the person can stay where they are. And I think the other side of it is really that the scale of the building is appropriate to that setting, in our opinion.
Okay, we're finished. Thank you very much. Right, we now move on to the Parish Council. Councillor Rosa Lewis. You have 3 minutes. You switch on the mic and there you go.
Thank you. Edgecombe House, scale, massing and design. Policy TP1, General Development Principles. TP4, Open Market Housing. The Planning Officer rightly states that TP4 1.1 of Felsden Neighbourhood Plan supports infills inside its development boundary. However, this overlooks the very important intention behind that decision, which was to ensure the provision of houses for working people and prevent migration of local people from the parish. At 3 times the nationally accepted size for a 3-bedroomed house, instead of helping to correct the imbalance in local housing stock, will add to an already oversupply of large, expensive houses. Passing this application would confirm for the future any house, regardless of size, given only 3 bedrooms, would be acceptable. Design. The design does not reflect the local vernacular, and with 75% of the ground floor glazed, raises questions of light pollution in relation to dark skies policy. Location, TP22, Natural Environment, Dev 35, Managing Flood Risk and Water Quality Impacts, TP1, Residential Amenity. This is a development in a garden leading to a floodplain, 8 metres from the designated floodplain, with 885 square metres of its curtilage permanently in the floodplain. Clearly a reason why the bottom of this valley has remained undeveloped until now. Any flood mitigation measures proposed will be seriously challenged by the speed with which our climate is changing. Dev 35 requires any development should demonstrate it will not increase the flood risk elsewhere and should in fact show it will reduce the flood risk overall. Building in this location cannot possibly achieve this. Environment agents may not believe that this is an issue. Their main concern normally is being safe access and egress from a building during a flood, which could explain their non-objection. New linear development, planning considerations say one development does not mean more will follow. The reality is successful application become triggers for further development. No proven need, it does not fill the criteria set out in TP 1.1, point 2, point 3, point 4 and 5 for residential amenity, dark skies, natural environment and design and infrastructure. In summary, the scale and mass of this building would ensure any oversized building in the parish is acceptable, regardless of need. West Buckland Stream is already vulnerable to any increase in surface water runoff, leading to flooding of neighbouring gardens and the local highway, impacting quite seriously residential amenity. Hopefully you will reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, have you any questions? Yes, Councillor Councillor Smerdon first and then Councillor Brazil afterwards.
You've said that in your opinion, 75% of the ground floor is glazed?
Yes.
Could we have a confirmation whether our
I don't have the exact statistics, but I mean, looking at the plans, I would say it's probably less than that. I mean, the plans are up there now.
That's
so.
the front elevation, but I mean, you got the back and two sides, which.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, it's a subjective decision.
Brazil?
Yeah, thank you. Just through you, Chair. Interested that you say that within your neighbour. I mean, obviously, the only reason why this is acceptable at all is because within your neighbourhood plan, you say that you will allow building of houses within the development boundary of West Buckland. But you're saying that this contradicts it because that was specific to for allowing housing need. Can you give us some detail as to what it actually? I mean, sorry, apologies. I should have looked it up myself. But in your neighbourhood plan, what does it actually say in respect of that?
The justification for it is to provide housing for young working people and prevent the further migration of local people out of the parish in search of cheaper housing, to contribute, importantly, to more active, vibrant, year-round community, to support our schools, shops, services and facilities, and to enhance and maintain the vitality of all three villages in a parish as a whole. So TP4 1.1, which is Charlotte's Point, small-scale tenure that reflects clearly identified local housing needs.
Okay.
This house is 292 square metres in size.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? So in that case, then we'll move on to the two ward members. Thank you very much. Just like to turn your mic off, thanks. Who's going to go first?
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, well, thank you.
I think, you've heard from both of the speakers so far, and you've seen and I thank everybody who attended the site visit. I think there is no argument that development is allowable there. But I think what the committee need to look at is, as has been identified, specifically the scale of the property. There is an element of the design, I think the glazing, as I said, and the setting, and obviously the impact on the natural environment of aspects which may or may not be able to be conditioned. But I think, as has been picked up, I think councillors need to sort of consider and address the principle of development with what the parish council were looking for in their neighbourhood plan. And I think the parish councillor just highlighted the justification for the open market housing and the related need. And I think you need to seriously consider, does this property meet that housing need? Does it address that that requirement within the area? And I think I'd ask you to sort of give serious consideration to the design. And I think there seems to be some contradiction as to whether the design actually does reflect what is local. I think the comment that has been made about the slate hanging may well, if you like, knock the property back in its impact rather than being white rendered in that setting, but accepting that, there is a principle of development on that site. I think you have to give consideration. Is the scale appropriate? Is the design appropriate? There is a question about glazing, and I think it needs to be, you need to look at it from the point of view that it seems to address the impact on neighbours, but has the scale of the glazing been addressed with the sort of potential impact on flight lines of bats in the area and the impact there? And I think there's a lot lacking for that impact, because it is a very sensitive, and I think people should consider, when you've been there and you've seen it, it is, a valley, it is a marshy valley, it is a wooded valley, so it's an important habitat, and I think you've got to sort of give serious consideration about the natural environment and the impact there. And I think that's it. You really do need to look at that. So that's the reason I bought it, because there was concern there, and I think members need to look at that and address that. I'll leave my points there, Chairman, and await the debate and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Pearce, would you like to come and join us? Yeah, have you any questions for Councillor Long before we go?
Morning, everybody. I would like to thank those of you who came on the site inspection on Monday, because I think it was very instructive to see the site. Now, you will see that the Parish Council raised several concerns, which I think were echoing the concerns of the neighbouring residents who had also raised concerns. But I do think that Charlotte has dealt with these very well in her report. And I've got a few things to add. Now, as far as the neighbourhood plan goes, I would like to tell you a little bit about this because I think it is important. When our neighbourhood plan was approved, we had a very high turnout of over 60% of the voters in the parish eligible to vote who voted. And of those, over 90% endorsed the plan, which by my maths calculation means that over 50% of people who live in the parish endorsed the plan when it went to referendum. The basis of the plan is policy TP1, which are general development principles. And I'd like to read you some of the preamble. You've got the list of items that comprise that policy. But it says, in the particular circumstances of this parish, the community's vision is to achieve sustainable development by promoting small-scale development of the right type in the right location. This means according to proven local need and where it does not detrimentally harm the AONB, the Heritage Coast and the undeveloped coast. The plan does not include any site allocations, but rather takes a holistic approach to sustainable development by looking at the parish in the context of a village network where development in one settlement supports services and facilities in another for the benefits of the parish as a whole. In this way, the plan will benefit the parish as a whole and help to satisfy the economic, social and environmental requirements needed to achieve sustainable development. There is a little bit more, but I won't take up the time reading it. So the point of this building is, and I think this is the one point you've really got to consider here is there a proven proven need for this building in the form it is? Now, we heard from the agent that there is the possibility here to adapt it for later living. And I think that's very important because there are very few houses in the parish that have this advantage. There have been concerns about flooding, but there is a condition for surface water drainage details to be submitted. And I can assure you that those will show that the drainage arrangements will actually afford betterment in this valley, which is liable to flood, because the runoff from the site will be no more than greenfield runoff, but with an additional 40% allowance for climate change in the future. So in fact, it will impact the stream less than the field does at the moment, at least as far as the site for this house is concerned. And I think the officers could confirm that that will be the case. As to the glazing, I think the 75% can only apply to the west and the south elevations. And you need to remember that on the west elevation, there is a wall which curves round so that that side glazing will not shine directly out down the extent of the greenfield, the garden that you saw on Monday, because the wall will prevent the light from escaping from that area. Charlotte, have you got a plan that shows that? Yes, there we are. So that there you can see the wall wrapping round there. I'd just like to point that out. I'm not saying it's a good feature or a bad feature, but it is something that's maybe got a bit lost in the plans because it's quite difficult to show. And you can see there, G, you can see where the proposed soakaway area is, and that will have valves that will control the runoff into the stream, as I say, less than the greenfield runoff for that site. So all the hard surfaces are taken care of by that runoff area. Other than that, I think I've got little to say, but I think what you really need to concentrate on is there a proven local need, and I would say there are very few properties that have any ability to be adapted for later life in the parish at all. There are bungalows, but there's nothing quite like this.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Pearce? Yes, Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, if I may, I'm interested about that. You talk about the need, because within the narrative that we have from the neighbourhood plan, it doesn't talk about lifetime housing at all. It talks about young working families. So I'm just interested that you've sort of put that extra spin on it. I mean, what proof do we have of that?
I don't think it's extra spin, but I think that the JLP provides for that and asks for a certain proportion of houses when they're being built to comply with Part M of the building regulations, I think, which is adaptations for disabled and older residents. So it's not a spin I'm putting on it, but I think you've got to look at this in the context of the whole development plan. So part of it is the neighbourhood plan, part of it is the JLP, and we've got to consider all of it. But I think we've got to start from basic principles, and we're always being told with the JLP, you don't pick out specific policies. You've got to look at it holistically with the strategic policies as well as the detailed policies. That's what I've tried to do. It's very difficult to do in the short time I've got.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Right then, members. We're into the debate. Who's going to start? Come on, don't be shy. Councillor Brazil.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just eating a biscuit there. Yeah, I went on the site visit. I thought it was a very good site visit, because I have to say, normally when something like this would come along, I would be 100% opposed to it because of the impact that would have on the neighbourhood. But I have to say, the setting of it, I think, is, if you're going to build anywhere, that's probably about the best place. And I accept what we've heard about the ecology report, so I'll go along with that. But I have to say, listening to the debate that we've had here, I am very concerned about the size of this building and the fact that, and if you look at that map there, we've got car parking spaces for 2 cars. Well, this is going to be a substantial 3/4 bedroom. I mean, that's obviously something that we're going to have to really tighten up in our joint local plan, or SPD, because this is quite clearly not what the parish or the neighbourhood plan intended when they saying that they were going to allow infill within their village, because this is quite frankly a pretty large detached dwelling that is going to be way out of the price range of any of the people that are pretty much mentioned in that report. And look, that's, you know, as we see, people think when they sign up to something like the neighbourhood plan that that it's all well and good, and what they're going to allow is a little 2-3 bedroom terrace cottage to be built for local people, and what they do is they get this. And that is the warning about it, is that unless we are incredibly tight in our policy making, we're gonna allow this to happen, because this is absolutely not what they intended from their neighbourhood plan. Absolutely exactly the kind of thing they were trying to stop. And all this will do is encourage neighbourhoods to say, we're not going to allow any housing in our parish whatsoever, because we know what's going to happen. It's going to be exploited, and this is what's happened here. I don't know whether we've got the policies that are strong enough to refuse this, because the way it's been twisted, quite frankly, in my view. I'll hear what Mark has to say as the local ward member. But I just think it's very disappointing that, you know, this whole idea that neighbourhood plans are there to represent what local people want and things like that, and then we get this which runs a coach and horses through that policy, quite frankly. A coach and horses is exactly what they didn't want, and they've got it. And, you know, it's incredibly frustrating. So in a way, what I've learnt more from this
application is that we need to be incredibly tight when we're talking about things and define that when we say 3-bedroom, we mean 3 or 2-bedroom. We don't mean a 10-bedroom that has enormous studies, etc., that can then be twisted round and made to look like a small 3-bedroom detached house, because that is not what this is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brazil. I think Mr. Weimer would like to come in first, and then we'll go to Councillor Brown afterwards.
Happy to go to Councillor Brown first.
All right, Councillor Brown.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Like Councillor Brazil, I found the site visit extremely informative and useful, and it certainly gave me an added sense of the site that simply looking at it on paper doesn't. I personally thought the proposals and indeed think the proposal is fairly reasonable, and the site visit confirmed that in my view. So, and I'm particularly heartened by the Section 106 to secure principal residency, which I think should hopefully avoid a lot of the issues that have been raised by the Parish Council and other people that have spoken on this. I largely agree with what is in the officer's report on this application, and I don't have a problem with it, so I shall propose conditional approval subject to completion of Section 106 to secure principal residency in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Before going any further, Mr. Weimer, would you like to have something to say?
Thank you, Chair. Whilst Councillor Brazil was setting out the policy position, I've been doing a little bit more digging into the neighbourhood plan policy. So, neighbourhood plan policy TP4, which is for open market housing, the policy itself doesn't provide an upper limit of bedrooms. The first paragraph is what's on the top there, but at the bottom it says identified local housing needs means in accordance with the finding of the Council's Housing Needs Survey report of June 2016. I've made the assumption that that's the June 2016 Housing Needs report that was prepared by this council on behalf of the Thurleston Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group. And in the, bear with me a second, it's section 4, future open market housing provision. The survey has identified the following potential needs in the private sector over the next 5 to 10 years. More 2 and 3 bedroom properties, so that's where I think the upper limit of 3 bedrooms has come for young families, couples to buy in the 125 to 350,000 pound price range, and that was in 2016. So I'm not sure that, and I'd have to do some checking, but I'm not sure that in 2016 350,000 would have been within the price range of your average average young couple or families to buy at that point. So just to put a little bit of context, and what I haven't been able to find out quickly searching is what the house price inflation has been from 2016 to now, but 350,000 in 2016, I would suggest there's been at least a 50% increase between now and then. But where I do absolutely agree with Councillor Brazil is that moving forward, if policies do need to be perhaps tighter, right? If we want to say no, it's only X at X amount, then it needs to be saying that. But just a bit of context, I believe that's where the neighbourhood plan policy is coming from. I think that's where the 2 or 3 bedrooms have come from, but that's what the Housing Needs Survey was saying in, I say, 2016. I hope that helps.
Right, thank you. Now I have a proposal for to go with the officer's recommendation for approval. Do I have a seconder? No, I need to find out whether I got a seconder before we, unless, Mark, do you want to come back before we do that?
Is there a seconder?
I need a seconder first before, and then we still, right, thank you. Okay. Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chairman. Interestingly, I don't think anybody is questioning that if there was to be a site to be developed, and there are pockets, if anyone looks around the village, there are pockets that could be developed. And I think what has been highlighted, I think, by Councillor Brazil and certainly Mr. Weimer, is the deficit or the problems with our JLP policy, but also not criticising the work that was done on the neighbourhood plan, but it was the intention that smaller properties would be developed. And obviously, I think in anybody's terms, you know, approaching 300 square metre property is a large property. And I accept that the comment that Councillor Pearce said, you know, there's a need in the community for properties that can be converted in the future. And there are many properties that wouldn't be able to achieve this. So I accept that, but it is a two-storey property, it is a big property, and that still means that it's outside the affordability of a lot of people in the area. And I do accept what Mr. Weimer said about the house price inflation, but I think the policy that that was being looked at within the neighbourhood plan was to achieve affordable housing. I think moving away from that, there is still some questions as to the size of the property in itself, if you get away from the housing needs and the neighbourhood plan policy, from the point of view of its impact. There are challenges and questions on the design. I can only recall 2 properties which are tile hung in the village itself, although I do accept that tile hanging in this situation would knock it, as I said, would knock it back. But also I think what we're looking at here is there is an element where we have addressed, or has been addressed, the impact on the neighbours. I think most of the neighbours accept that they do not, under planning, have a right to a view. The situation has been addressed with the roof lights on the back, and they are obscure, and I'm not sure whether they would still, by being obscure, still provide upward lighting. If you go through that area, there are very, very few Veluxes, and sitting down there, I think it does introduce some additional upward light, and in a sensitive area. The glazing, I still believe, is excessive. I know there is a wall being built, but it's quite a substantial distance from the substantially glazed corner, and that glazing does go down into what I still class as a very sensitive site to the south of the property. It is sensitive. I think more due consideration could have been given to the design of it. I do appreciate the work that the officers have made in getting changes and getting to this stage, but I would have preferred to have seen more. I have a problem, as I say, with the size of the property, the fact that it does appear to be contrary to the neighbourhood plan. I have a problem with some of the design and the potential impact on that valley, which is a very sensitive valley from the point of view of bats and others, I have to say. So for me, I can't support this application in its present form. I'm not saying that if something came back that was changed, adapted, then I would not support it. But I agree with what the parish council have put about their concerns. I think there is a balance here with regard to flooding, and there may well be some mitigation with greenfield flooding by what is being achieved there. But I think that what we have to look at is that, and it's been proven time and time again, flooding is only getting worse, and Environment Agency flood zones have been shown to be wrong in the past. And one of the things I didn't do was to look at when the timing, when these flood zones were actually designated by the Environment Agency, because we've had other issues where they've been 6 or 7 years out of date and proven to be wrong. And I'm hopefully it won't be there. But I think, Mr. Chairman, I think with this, I am disappointed with this application. obviously I'm disappointed with our policies that they aren't as tight around this. I think the intention was there from the neighbourhood plan that buildings such as this would not be filling the housing needs survey, and I don't believe this will fit the housing needs survey. And I don't honestly believe, although I'm pleased about it, that Section 106 principal residency goes any distance to address it. So, Mr. Chairman, unfortunately I can't support this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. There's absolutely evidence that there's a shortage of houses that are affordable and suit young people coming up into the house buying market. However, that argument doesn't stop this being an application that is worthy of supporting. It is large. The person has the ground. It is meeting the criteria of fitting into the landscape. I can't see that the arguments made on flooding or on ecology are really holding water. So I'm going to support the motion that this should go ahead.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, sorry, Councillor Hodgson, I beg your pardon.
Thank you. I think this is a really difficult one, actually, because I think we're just really talking about how adequate our policies are and how tight they are. And of course, at the end of the day, what decision we make today, if we go against it, could come back to bite us at appeal. And I feel that, and I would welcome Mr. Weimer's views on this, whether or not a refusal would be held up at appeal. I can't see that, actually, having listened to all the policy discussions, that actually it would be quite on the edge. And I think, as much as I agree with the points that have been made about, with the neighbourhood plan, and I always try where possible to support the local community, and particularly when they take the trouble to make a neighbourhood plan, it's really unfortunate when something can kind of slip through in a way, because obviously the intention of this was always there was going to be 5 properties. So it shows how large this proposal is. So I think, actually, I'm happy to support Councillor Long in objecting to it if you're actually putting forward, if you're proposing refusal. Yeah, and I'd support that. But I just would be, before we go ahead, I think it'd be interesting to hear what might be if this went to appeal, because I think it's something very serious we have to consider here.
Accept one proposal at a time. If you want to vote against it, you vote against it, and if that vote goes against the proposal, then I'll come back to you. Okay. What I do want to say, and you all know, I have criticised certain aspects of the joint local plan and so on and so forth, but we've been through hell and back in the last 2 years. We've had a pandemic that's changed people's lives, the way they work. A lot more people working from home, and the requirements, housing needs and everything else. It's totally changed from when the joint local plan was put together, and to a certain extent when the neighbourhood plan was started. And yeah, I'm the same. What the local people want and what they can get, but whatever policies we have in place, can we provide that? Because it's, at the end of the day, it's about money. At the real end of the day, whether they can afford something or not, whether we can afford to build something that they can afford. So anyway, I'll say no more than that on that. But we've got to remember, things have moved on a long way. So I have a proposal.
Sorry,
yes.
Chairman, I thought there was a question from Councillor Hodgson for me to answer.
Well, okay. Right.
I agree with Councillor Abbott in that I don't think we've got a refusal reason that could be defended and appeal insofar as ecology, because we've got an ecologist looked at it and said it's fine. Flooding, the Environment Agency have looked at it. I understand the comments you made about the Environment Agency, but they're the body that do look at it. They've looked at it, they've said it's fine. I can't see how we would be able to argue in front of an inspector that we know better than the Environment Agency, and there's a flooding issue. So I think those, from my point of view, I think those two would be very, very difficult to defend. Just to be clear, I didn't think I was criticising the joint local plan. I have a long time ago given up trying to predict an inspector's decision because we have had a number of decisions over the years since I've been here where both appeals have been allowed and appeals have been dismissed, where we're all scratching our heads a little bit on where's the logic of the inspector. So it would be impossible for me to say categorically whether any application, whether the inspector would support or not support the council's decision. I have gone through I've gone through this report. I do support Charlotte's recommendation. I think my biggest concern is that moving from what the chairman said, is that the housing needs survey is now 7 years old, and how much can that still be relied on? But I'm sorry, I'm not going to fall off the fence on which way an inspector's going to go, because that inevitably will come back to bite at some point.
Before I go to the vote, Councillor Long, you mentioned some conditions. I don't know if we want to add
wanted clarification on conditions, because I think you said it, Mr. Wyman. I think I can see the way this is going, but one of the obviously my concerns is light spill to the south, and there is a condition 7 details of any external lighting. I think in a lot of places where we have dark sky, and particularly that, we have said no external lighting, and I think this gives a requirement. Does that would that condition allow us to say no external lighting?
I don't, as it's worded, I'm not sure it does enough, is strong enough to say no, because I think by inviting details that would suggest that some lighting would be acceptable. If members feel that there should be no external lighting, then it is within your decision to the application is going to be a delegated decision anyway, if approved, because of the 106. There's no reason why you couldn't say and condition 7 to be altered to no external lighting.
Mr. Chairman, you can see my views. I would much prefer that there is no external lighting, and also I think some greater clarity around the light emissions from glazing, because I know we've got the obscured roof lights, and to know what sort of impact that would have on the dark skies. I'm looking particularly at dark skies policy here in that valley. Thank you.
Are you proposing an amendment?
I would propose an amendment on the external lighting, and I'm at a loss to sort of find where conditions about light emissions to glazing falls within these conditions. I don't see it actually.
From experience, I'm not sure that we can condition light spill from the house itself. I think it's unrealistic to expect that they wouldn't have lights on. And it's not something that we can really enforce. If we said they have to have curtains, for example, we can't enforce that. Mr. Wyman may want to jump in, but in my experience, that's not something that we can realistically control. It doesn't meet the conditions tests to try and control lighting from within a house.
I think we have had low emission or reduced emission glazing on certain aspects of properties before.
I don't disagree with Charlotte in many ways. I think Mr. Fairman has reminded me that he thinks we put a condition on glazing at probably 2 or 3 committees ago at the the outline application for the dwelling at the boatyard at back. Was it boatyard at? Was it the Dartmouth one? Or, I would like to, if I can have a couple of
Do you
minutes to
wish
see if
to,
I can
do you
find
wish
that
to
condition.
adjourn for 5 seconds?
I wouldn't mind, just to
yeah,
find that
okay.
condition.
We'll
and stuff.
adjourn. We've got to get started.
It's going to be great.
Speed typing.
So I'm adjourning this for 5 minutes to get proper advice, okay? Alright, I'll be aware we are back online, okay? Right, Councillor Long has proposed an amendment. Does Councillor Brown and Taylor accept that amendment?
Chairman, I'm happy to accept the condition regarding no outdoor lighting as part of what would be the substantive motion.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll do that.
right. Now, Mr. Weimer? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hudson, yes.
I was only
beg
going to
your
say
pardon.
that when we give a condition, we usually give reasons, and the reason that's currently under condition 7, which I understand has been amended, says in the interest of the amenities of the occupiers and neighbouring residential properties. I think we should say and, to avoid detriment to the local ecology.
And dark skies.
Dark skies.
Yeah,
Dark skies,
dark
isn't it?
skies.
Yeah, right, yeah. I think that's fine. Mr. Weimer?
Thank you, Chair. The suggestion that can there be a condition in respect of light spill from the glazing in the property? A condition that was imposed at this committee, because it was a committee decision, on the dwelling at Distins Boatyard, Dartmouth, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, was one of the conditions was all glazing shall be treated to have low light transmission properties, i.e. with visible light transmission of 40% or less, unless otherwise agreed in writing by the local planning authority, and be retained in that condition for the lifetime of the development. And the reason for the condition was in the interest of the character and appearance of the development, the visual amenity of the area in which it's set, including the setting of A and B, interest of protection, protected species and habitats. So I clearly that's a condition that's been used before. I would have no issue with members suggesting that. And on the change of condition 7 to no lighting, can I just ensure that members consider, because especially those that went on the site visit, is it acceptable to have absolutely no lighting at all from a safety perspective walking to and from that site when it's dark, or is there a need for low level lighting? I wasn't at the site visit, so I'm just making sure that's actually considered. You may well, and if you say yes, it's fine, then yes, that's obviously.
Because that's the back of the house, so that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and also they've got lights on in the windows. Then there'll be light spill outside, so they'll enter the house from the other side, I'm presuming, because that's where you approach it.
That's it for me.
Okay, are we clear now? Mr. Weimer, are you quite happy with the conditions and everything before we go to the vote?
I think councillors Brown and Taylor, would be useful if they could confirm they're happy with the additional condition regarding the transmission of light from the windows.
Right.
If they are, then as far as I'm concerned, the motion is delegated approval subject to the alteration to condition 7, an additional condition for the transmission and the completion of the legal agreement for the principal residency.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Following on from what Mr. Weimer has said, I am happy with the additional condition regarding light out spill and for the similar condition as proposed for, I think it was the Distins Boatyard at Dartmouth, that we put that on as well as part of the substantive motion.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Yes, I'm happy with that. Providing that the lighting to get into there from the road is low-level lighting rather than high-level lighting. Can we deal with that? Because we don't want street lights, if you like. You know, we need low-level lighting.
For you, Chair, that I thought the change to condition 7 was no external lighting, not low level. I thought it was no external lighting.
I thought we were talking about the entrance in when it might be a safety aspect.
Can we suggest we get them a torch?
I mean, for you, Chair, my understanding from Councillor Long's amendment was that condition 7 was changed from, in the officer report it is details of lighting to be submitted to us. That is to be changed to no external lighting, and that was the amendment that was suggested.
Yeah, okay, I accept that.
That's what's on the table. Right, you accept that? Right, thank you very much. So now we'll leave it at that now. We're going to go to the vote, okay? So members, I'm not going to reel off all that Mr. Weimer reeled off just now. You listened, you know what you're voting for, so can I have a show of hands, all those in favour of the officer's recommendation as put forward by Mr. Weimer for approval? You've got 6, yeah? Those against? That's 2, 3 against. That's okay, yeah. We've got an abstention somewhere. 2 abstentions. 3 abstentions. Okay, that application is approved. Okay. That's application, we'll reel it off if you like. Application 411822 full is approved. Okay, right, we'll move swiftly on, members, to the next application, which is Higher Farley Meadow, Deptford. Charlotte, would you like to present the case, please?
Thank you. So just before I start the presentation, since the report was published, we've had one additional letter of support. However, no new issues were raised. So the report covers anything raised in that letter. So members may remember this application. It came to committee in November last year, presented by Claire Stewart on my behalf. So it is an area of agricultural land. So the application originally was submitted for it's a retrospective application for a building measuring 12 metres by 5. The application was refused by members on officer recommendation. It was considered that there wasn't an essential need for the building. The application that's in now has been reduced in size, so it's now 9 metres instead of 12, so essentially a 4-bay building becoming a 3-bay building. The site area that the applicant owns and farms remains the same, so it's 1 acre, so it is a very small area of land. So the elevations, it's quite a utilitarian design. Officers don't have any concerns with the design in principle. It's a functional agricultural building. You can see the comparison between the two sizes of the previous application and the current proposal here. So it's proposed to use the building for digger, chipper, trailer, tractor, tools and the storage of hay. So just a few photos just to remind members. I know Claire took most of you out on site, but just this is the appearance of the building. So the recommendation remains as refusal, and I think it's important to remind members of the policy context. So TTV 26 and DEV 15 require proven agricultural, forestry or other occupational need. And again, DEV 15 kind of reiterates the essential needs of agriculture or forestry interests. The concerns that officers have, again, the site is only 1 acre. It's very small. There's no evidence need really for a building of that size. I know last time there was talk about, you know, adapting to different methods of agriculture and, you know, not necessarily, you know, just going for larger schemes. That's something that officers accept. But I think in considering this one and coming to our recommendation, we have considered that it is a very small area of land. And given the, you know, the amount of equipment that's proposed to be sited in it, You know, we sort of have questions about whether, you know, given the small area of land, is it viable that so much machinery is going to be bought? Would it be, you know, sort of contracted in instead? Is there really a need for such a big building on this size? As I've said, a smaller building could potentially be supported. We're not disputing that the applicant wants to use it for agricultural purposes. But again, just to keep repeating myself, it is a very small area of land. The design is absolutely fine. As I've said, the site's largely obscured, as members will remember, so there's no landscape concerns, there's an existing access. I'm aware that last time there was a lot of discussion from when the applicant's agent spoke about the personal circumstances of the applicant. They've obviously been through a horrific time, but personal circumstances are not a planning consideration. We've got the policies which talk about essential need, and in this case, we don't consider that there is an essential need for a building of this size, given the size of the site. So the recommendation remains as refusal.
Thank you, Charlotte. Questions, Councillor Panel?
Just to clarify, if I remember rightly, we brought this to committee because it was recommended for approval last time.
So last time, initially I recommended it for approval. It was then reviewed by other officers who've got more experience with agricultural stuff, who thought the recommendation should be refusal. I'm perfectly happy to admit when I'm wrong.
Right, yeah, I recall now. I remember I was going away on holiday at that stage. So
Yeah.
it came to me late, yes, that originally recommended for approval and then reversed to refusal. Thank you very much for making that clear.
Right. Any other, Councillor Smurden?
Members will recall from the site visit that there was also a container, you know, a storage container in the corner of the site, which we felt, which you can actually see there in blue, which we felt, you know, needed regularising, etc. I'm assuming there is no, you know, that regularising the positioning of that container is not contained within this application.
No, this application is just for the building, albeit a shortened version of the existing building.
Right.
No, the container's got nothing to do with this application.
No. So if the applicant wanted to retain that, they'd have to make a separate application. Right, thank you.
Any other questions? Whilst the questions, I'm going to ask a question. What about the old fire engine? What's happened to that? Is it still there?
That may be a question for the speaker on behalf of the
Okay,
applicant.
all right, I'm fine. In that case, if there's no further questions of the officer, we will go to no objector to Mrs. Burden, supporter, please.
Good morning, members. I act for Stephen Fearon together with his family, who own the 1 acre site that you visited in November last year. The sole intention was to create a self-sufficient holding whilst managing the land in an environmental way. The applicant's aim is to establish a small holding to rear a few goats for milk, have a few chickens and ducks and beehives, as well as growing vegetables on the plot, whilst at the same time giving his young family the opportunity to be outdoors and enjoy the freedom and fresh air of the countryside and try and live a sustainable existence. The applicant has prepared a detailed plan of his intentions that was submitted for the application, proving what we consider is his essential need for the building. The applicant and his family live in a shared ownership property, and this piece of land was the biggest piece of land that he could afford within the local area. When the applicant purchased the land, it was severely overgrown. He's undertaken a lot of renovation works. He's removed a large amount of waste, taken down some ramshackle tin shack buildings, and then wanted to return the land to productivity. His passion for land started many years ago when he did some qualifications at Capel College. When he cleared the land, he then naively constructed the storage building so he could store his equipment on the site, so he could manage the land, which would replace the ramshackle buildings that he'd removed. Unfortunately, as you've heard, he then roof timber fell on his head and neck, resulting in him having a bleed on the brain and 2 weeks later a stroke. He's now regaining strength, and now the spring is coming. He's going to be his agricultural activities to grow vegetables and crops this spring and to bring livestock on the site will commence. The applicant is devastated that we're before this committee again with a recommendation of refusal. This resubmission was put forward to include a reduction of the building by 25%. So it is, as Charlotte said, 3 bays instead of 4 bays. So rather than being 12 metres by 5, it would be 9 metres by 5, so just 45 square metres, that's the footprint. The building contains the applicant's digger and tractor and will be used for the storage of hay, which will be used in association with his no-dig agricultural system to produce vegetables, salads and produce, as well as all the other equipment that the applicant will use on the site with animal feed, etc. It is disappointing that the detailed plan and the applicant's intentions do not demonstrate the essential need, because we considered it did. The former fire engine provides a welfare facility currently, and a secure lockable store before the building is completed, and currently provides security to the open bays. However, this fire engine is for sale on Facebook Marketplace and will be removed once sold. The proposal, we believe, meets the need of a small-scale, self-sufficient proposal, and as you've heard, the officers confirmed that the building is of a suitable agricultural design, very simple, with a mono-pitch roof, simple cladding, and is located so it is not visible or obtrusive in the wider landscape. The applicant, Stephen Fearon, who's here again with me today, hopes that you will have faith in his proven ambitions to grow his own food and teach his young family to lead a more sustainable way of living and to enjoy the countryside. And we hope, therefore, very much that you will support this application for the 25% reduced size agricultural building as proposed. Thank you.
I congratulate you on the timing. Any questions? Right.
Are you Amanda, all right? You've said that the fire engine is on the market for sale and it would be removed as soon as it's sold. If it's not sold, is there a market for it?
There is a market for it and it will be removed, and the storage container too, so it will be removed.
Yeah, immaterial whether it's sold or not.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Just ask about
right, which one? Councillor Hodgson first, ladies first.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the shed itself. So, from what you've said, and my understanding is that the fire engine and the storage container provide secure accommodation for things that are left on site, because obviously they're not overnight there. So, is that the plan, to make it a really secure unit, so that they can actually store those things that would otherwise perhaps be at risk?
Yeah, so the fire engine itself is lockable, but at the moment the fire engine is sat across the 3 of the open bays to actually provide security. It's like the 4th wall of the building, if you like. And as you saw, the hydraulic pump with the side of the fire engine has come out, and that's been broken. That's getting mended so that it can be brought back in to be driven out. But the applicant has said he doesn't want it there. He doesn't want the hassle it's caused for you and for him. And like I said, it's being sold. So as soon as somebody buys it, it will be gone from the site. But the building is going to be clad on all 4 sides, as you can see there, with timber sliding doors. So that will be then a secure building. So anything that's in the fire engine can go there. He's never stayed on site. It's not for anything other than agriculture. So he'll just have a flask in the corner and maybe a couple of seats, sort of thing. Or bench or whatever, but it's just for the storage of tools, for hay. He uses a no-dig system, so he puts hay on his beds to cultivate them.
Thank you. We've got 2 ward members in a minute. I'm going to ask a very straight question.
I had a question.
Yeah.
You said later. Yeah, I was going to ask a question.
Well, I said to Guy.
I think I was just going to ask about the container, but I think you've addressed that as well, have you?
Thank you.
In your professional opinion, do you honestly think that it's possible to grow sufficient fruit or veg and everything else on an acre to prove an agricultural need there?
But we're not asking for a house. We're asking for a storage building to store the equipment in. So the proven need is the intentions. I mean, if you were doing aquaponics or some other alternative, then there's lots of agricultural things to make use of an acre of land. And even though it's only an acre of land, by the time you've got bees and the equipment that you have for bees, by the time you've got animal feed and hay and a tractor, there's a need for a small building. and we're talking about 45 square metres. So it's not standard agriculture. I think I said that before. It's growing his own food. He's not trying to make it as a business. So it's not like sort of selling grain or having a farm shop. It's for his own, consumption and for his family.
Thank you. That's all right. Right. Thank you very much. I don't think there's any more questions now. Okay. We have 2 ward members. Who's going to go first? Councillor Panel.
Thank you, Chair. I originally asked for this, the former application on this site to come to committee when it was recommended for approval, and as we've heard, that was later reversed. Because I wanted members to decide whether the scale of the agricultural building was appropriate for the size of the holding on which it sits. We now have to consider the fresh application, which has reduced the size of the barn, as we've heard, by 1 bay, and addressed other issues raised by members. As members debated the last proposal at committee, Councillor Smurden and myself debated it and refused it on a majority. Councillor Smurden and myself felt you should have the opportunity to decide the fresh application. Please don't take this as an indication that we oppose the officer's recommendation or otherwise. Ditford Parish Council have objected to the fresh application on the grounds that the building size is inappropriate for this amount of land of approximately 1 acre. At the last meeting, when the previous application was turned down, it was considered the building of this size was not required to support the essential needs of agriculture, given the small amount of land managed by the applicant. I think members need to decide whether you feel this reduction in size is sufficient to overcome those objections.
Thank you. Councillor Smurden.
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't got a great deal to add to what Councillor Panels said with regard to this. I think I'd prefer to wait until the debate until I say my piece. Is that okay?
It's absolutely fine.
Right.
So in that case, then we are now into the debate.
In that case, I'll.
You could have meandered in, as many members do.
Yeah.
Technically shouldn't, but okay.
There we go. I'm on my best behaviour as a temporary member. Yes, it's quite a difficult thing. I mean, so I'm obviously speaking, personally as I view the thing. When the last application, when we were able to view the site, we were able to see how the building set into the into the 1 acre. From a personal point of view, I can see what the applicant is doing, reducing it by 25%, and within the setting of that, I think the site would cope with that. I am heartened to hear that they intend to remove the container, although I would have, whatever, if it's hypothetical now, but if they had made an application to retain that, that could have been contained within this, but it hasn't been. And the fire engine, which is a bone of contention, I think that the applicant could have demonstrated his commitment by shifting it quicker, telling us that it's now for sale on Facebook Marketplace. Doesn't demonstrate the most resolute determination to shift it, but I think if he hasn't got the message loud and clear by now, well, then he should have. So on balance of probabilities, and given the fact that the container goes and the fire engine and the fire vehicle goes, I am prepared to recommend approval. Propose, right? Sorry, it's the yes.
Against officer's recommendation.
Yes,
Right.
okay. Not because I violently disagree with it, but because it's. I mean, it's a matter of to a degree a matter of semantic. I mean, we could propose that they reduce it by 50%, and whether it's so.
You've made a proposal for
Yes.
Against officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hodgson.
I'm happy to second that, and I'll give my. Would you like me to speak on it now as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. It was said earlier that the JLP was written before COVID. Things have changed a lot. I think there's been a big surge of interest in how we do our farming, how we do our agriculture. I'm not going to say anything different to what I said before when this came before committee just recently. I just think this is something we should support. I think we need to support people doing small-scale farming. It's not all about huge farms and fields full of cows anymore. It's people are looking at different ways of delivering a product from the land. And a 1 acre site, it might sound small to some people, but if you've got your sleeves rolled up and you're out there doing it by hand to some extent, actually it's quite a big area to manage, but it can be very productive. I have to express an interest in this because I actually have a small holding myself, so I kind of feel that I can understand it quite clearly. And this is a small scale unit to actually provide accommodation, secure accommodation for tools, for machinery, for all sorts of things that is actually really needed when you're doing this. You can't just turn up every day with all the kit in the back of the car, especially if they've got young children and things like that. You need to be able to leave it on site. You need to be able to leave wet clothing, wet wellies, wet boots. You need things to be able to dry out. You need, you actually need some kind of accommodation, weatherproof accommodation and secure accommodation. And I think this is really quite modest. So I'm happy to support this, and I wish these people luck in their venture.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Anybody else got anything to add to the debate? Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. My ward is very rural. We covers probably, I don't know how many thousand acres. I am fearful that if we go against the recommendation from the agricultural consultant that allows a shed of this size to be built on an acre, that this could proliferate throughout the AONB, the Heritage Coast, so whereas I have much sympathy with the current applicant and his position, I'm afraid I absolutely can't support this because I think it would. I know we can't set precedents, but if we are going to allow this kind of size shed to be built on every single acre in the South Hams, it would massively change the landscape, and I don't believe that is what we are trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure that there is an appraisal from the agricultural agent or agricultural agent within the council, is there? Which I think you did say, Councillor Brazil.
Mr. Weimer?
To the best of my knowledge, we haven't consulted the agriculture.
Okay.
This is a recommendation that's come from officers, and we felt it wasn't necessary to go.
Sorry if I misspoke there. So my assumption is that we have decided that this size of holding does not is not large enough to allow a building of this size to be built on it. And that's come direct. I mean, I assume that we'd taken some direction from an agricultural consultant, but you believe that with your experience already, that you believe that is the case, that they would not have accepted that. Sorry. Apologies for that.
That's all right. Furthermore, I don't think this is in the AONB, is it?
No. Through you, Chairman, no, it's not.
No, thank you. Because living as I do in a rural patch around my village and the outskirts, there are quite a lot of these buildings that spring up. They haven't got planning permission. They get enforcement orders put upon them, but nothing ever happens. They're still there, going back from 2019 when they've been reported. And somebody's just put a very nice drive in through to one of them. It's on an enforcement order, but it's not being enforced. And I actually think we're not tight enough on some of the stuff that we should be seeing to enforce. We've got this guy who's come forward with, he is obviously run into trouble. Somebody's reported him, and he is being pursued to either by enforcement or to get planning permission. If he can't get planning permission, then I assume that somebody will make sure that they remove it. But, you know, we are a long way behind with our enforcement orders, and I do feel that there's a lot of things that need to be tightened up on, and that is one of them. Thank you.
Councillor Panel, you put your hand up again?
I just wanted to clarify about the agricultural consultant, because on the last time round I asked the officers about this and was told that the site was too small for the agricultural consultant to give an opinion because it didn't qualify. Okay. So I think that was where we stood with that. Can I comment now, Chairman?
Yeah.
I have a lot of sympathy with this applicant. I understand what's going on. I reluctantly, I feel it's just still too big. I think another reduction might fit what is needed, but I agree with Councillor Brazil that if we were to allow a building of this size on every acre of South Hams, we would be in a position where we were totally changing the landscape. I think another reduction might win my approval, but I think on balance I'm going to have to oppose this.
Okay, Councillor Long, you were asking.
Chairman, point of clarification, before I give some comments, there's been a lot of discussion, and do I recall in your presentation earlier that you did say a smaller building could be acceptable?
Yeah, I think without sort of any predetermination thing, I think in principle a small building could be acceptable that is proportionate to the holding. You know, we're not disputing what Councillor Hodgson mentioned or that Amanda mentioned, that, you know, yeah, if you're working there you might need a shelter or something like that. Not a problem with that in principle, but again, it's the scale of this building proportionate to the size of the holding.
Thank you, Charlotte. I got some comments as well. You know, we're talking about the container and it's, you know, that it's indication it's going to be removed. You know, if this was to go for a vote, that would need to be conditioned because, you know, there are circumstances where I know where containers have been placed supposedly temporarily because there's no base and they stay there. I think we'd need to tighten that up. And I think just because enforcement has not been shown to be adequate, you know, around the area in certain places, and I think I can beat, you know, it's 2016 one case in my ward. I don't think there's justification for agreeing something like this. And I think, as Councillor Brazil has said, and others, I think there's great sympathy for what the intention is, but I think this building is just too large, so I would be supporting the officer on this. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Hodgson.
Just to give us a bit of perspective, a parking space, a car parking space. So if you've got one vehicle in this building, if we are looking at those parking spaces, it's 2.5 wide, or usually 3 metres wide by 6 metres long. We're talking about 1.5 times the size of that. We're not talking about a very big area here. And as much as I hear what people are saying, and I care passionately about how the countryside looks and how it's managed, but I think when we're talking about diversity, which is really what this individual, as far as I understand it, is trying to do, you do need quite a lot of kit. You do need quite somewhere to store your spare hives. You do need somewhere to store all sorts of bits and pieces that you're doing, including plants, including small seedlings that you're bringing on, all sorts of things. And I just think we're being really, to be honest, we're letting the blinkers sit on as to what we think farming should look like. And I think we need to be perhaps a little bit more flexible if we want young families and young people to come into the farming community and start to thrive and start to show us how farming can be much more lower carbon footprint, how it can be more diverse, and how it can also help us with what we have a problem at the moment, which is actually having food in this country. You think about, you know, the restrictions that have been in the shops recently in terms of a lot of produce, that small scale farming, old horticulture, etc., can actually provide for our local needs. And I just think we should I'm, as I say, really happy to support this because I think it's the kind of thing and diversity that we need.
Thank you. Anybody else? I will say a little on this. I fully support what Councillor Brazil says. I mean, in the two areas that he and I represent, we've seen the proliferation of too many buildings. Now, I'm very sympathetic to the applicant and what he wants to do, but if we continue to do that, we will totally change the landscape of South Hams. If that's what you want to do, that's fine, but it's not what I want to do, so I should be supporting the officer on this recommendation. Okay, at the moment as it stands, unless anybody has anything else to say, we have a recommendation for approval, which is against the officer's recommendation. So we will need some reasons why. Councillor Panel.
If the majority feel that they want to go along with that, can we condition that the fire engine and the container be removed as part of that permission?
We're talking about the building as it is at the moment. If we want to add things in a minute, we can, but I need reasons why the proposer and seconder of going against officer's recommendation, and I need the reasons why.
It's down to me. The officer is. It's just a question of what is the appropriate size. I think Charlotte has said that we would accept a building on the site. It's a question of have they made a large enough reduction to satisfy us. I hear what other members say with regard to concerns about the proliferation of buildings, etc. At least this one is being they have come to us for actual planning, whereas there's no shortage of ones around about where they just stick them up and carry on as as though nothing. You want me to stop? No, right. That's very subtle. Right. Okay. So effectively, I think that's it in a nutshell. I don't know how many how many conditions. Well, there's very little conditions that we can put on it. In terms of in terms of the size, my feeling is that the fact that they have reduced it, and having seen the site, it will fit within the site, and happy with conditions that the fire engine and the container be removed. No problem with conditions along those lines. I don't know. Do you need more than that? Yeah, yeah. Right.
Basically, I think what he's saying is that the size of the building as it is fits that is proportionate in his view.
Yeah. That pretty much sums it up, really. Yes.
The planning judgment. Oh, yeah, please, Mr. Warren.
So just if members are minded to approve the application, there are some conditions that I would recommend that it might be worth me going through, and then obviously you can decide if you want to apply them or not. So we'd have the standard time commencement. No, we wouldn't, because it's retrospective. Cross that out. So we wouldn't have that one. We would have the accord with plans condition, condition the use to be restricted to agricultural use only, and the building to be removed if it is no longer required for purposes of agriculture. I'd also recommend conditioning no external lighting because of the position of it. A condition requiring the removal of the fourth bay within 6 months of any permission granted, because obviously at the moment it is the larger building. It would need to be reduced. And then finally, condition, again, within 6 months of any permission granted, the removal of the container and the fire engine, and for no other containers or fire engines or other emergency vehicles to be put back on the site. So that would be my recommendation if members wanted to take those into account.
Thank you. Absolutely fine.
Yeah, absolutely fine with that.
Councillor Abbott.
Just on that details of that condition, should it also include other forms of accommodation like caravans and motorhomes, and where would you stop?
It's tricky, councillor, because there aren't any such items already on there, so we're not conditioning their removal. I think it would need to be, if members felt that was necessary, I think it would need to be a separate condition saying that no caravans, mobile homes or other forms of temporary accommodation shall be sited on the land. I think it'd have to be. I think it would have to be a separate condition. I don't think it could be tied up with the removal of the fire engine and the container, because there's no caravan to be removed at the moment. But if members are so minded, then yes, it could be an additional condition.
Happy for that to go.
I'm happy to support, yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not on live. Right. So content to go.
Delegated approval, details of conditions. Chair, the motion for the approval should be delegated, subject to the details of the conditions being agreed by with chairman, vice chairman, proposer, and seconder as normal.
Right. Okay, so just be clear in your minds, you are voting on the proposition that we go against the officer's recommendation of refusal. So in other words, you will be going for approval of this application. All those in favour of that? Four. Those against? Everybody? So that has failed, so we now have to go to the opposite proposal.
Another proposal.
So we need somebody to propose and second the officer's recommendation for refusal. Councillor Pano, are you proposing that we go with the officer's recommendation of refusal? Councillor Abbott, you're seconding that? Okay. We need no more than anything you want to add, Mr. Weimer?
No, Chair.
Thank you. So we're going to the vote now to go with. Oh yeah. Is there any further speakers? Sorry. I think everybody's spoken. Right. We will go to the vote now for, as per the officer's recommendation, that we refuse this application. So all those in favour of refusal. That's 8. Those against refusal? 4. So that application has been refused. That is application, I'll read it out properly. Higher Farley Meadow, Deptford. Okay. I haven't got a number on mine. Okay. Do we need another recess? Because we did have 5 minutes earlier, but we're going to change. We got to change. We have to change officers. If you very quickly want to use the facilities, do so, but don't make a meal of it. He's going to have to hurry up. Back on, please. Is that better? Yes, that's much better. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is 1 the Lee Mount Breakfast Lee. That is 3 treble 1 oblique 21 HHO. And Mr. Stewart, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, apologies, there is a mistake on the report. Underneath the location plan, there is an incorrect reference number to a different application, so I'll just point that out. Right, this site is situated in a loop between the A384, the A38 and the River Dart, as you can see on the attached plan. So for the purposes of considering this application, it's outside the confines of the village. You should also note that obviously with its proximity to the River Dart, it's within a flood zone as well, flood zone 2 and 3. The property itself is number 1 Lee Mount. It's one of 2 properties within that area formed by the road system and the river. There's a single access driveway almost opposite the Dartbridge Inn, which leads to both properties. So number 1 Lee Mount comprises a bungalow, which is the building with the number on it, towards the northeastern part of the site. Next to it is a large double garage and a large store. Beyond the store, roughly in the position of the arrow, is a mobile home, and you'll see that on the photographs when we come to them. The applicants propose the erection of an independent ancillary building, which is intended to comprise a garden room and studio. In between the two, there is a small toilet and sink area and store. And I believe in terms of studio, it's a music-related studio rather than artistic studio. The building's sited in the northeastern part of the site, and you will see that the large ramp, which is wrapping around the building where my cursor is, leads up to a raised ground floor area. It's raised because obviously immediately to the southwest, the land is within flood zone 2 and 3. The very back of the property also includes a small stairwell and means of escape. The means of escape is actually to ground within flood zone 3, which is almost on the roadside. The site's very well screened at the moment by vegetation running along the roadside, and I don't actually think you can see the buildings that are currently there at all. You would see the very corner of this building, because obviously providing a safe means of escape to a higher ground, it will mean the removal of some of the shrubs on the boundary of the site. In terms of appearance, the property is about 13 by 7 metres. It's single storey, set under a shallow pitched roof. Indication of materials, vertical timber cladding. You can see that there are quite a few windows in the elevation, and also you'll see the balustrading to the ramped access up to the front door of the building. Here are some photographs of the site. The top left-hand photograph is taken from the point of access into the plot. You can see on the very left-hand side the bungalow, you can see the driveway rising up the sloping ground. To the right of the bungalow is the double garage, and to the right of the double garage is the store building. Beyond all of those, you can see the mobile home, which is to be removed. And from the bottom picture, you'll see how the bungalow is raised up, series of steps up to the front door to take it out of the floodplain, and you'll just notice how steep this part of the site is. So in terms of the consideration of the proposal, as I said, it's a site within the countryside, and the principal policy is TTV 29, which talks about residential extensions. And in this respect, the policy at para 5 states that the extension should be appropriate in scale and design in the context of the setting of the host dwelling. There's a further guidance given in the accompanying SPD. Now, the SPD to this policy also states that in terms of appropriate, it gives an indication that the acceptable size would be anything up to 50% of the floor area of the host dwelling. Now, in this respect, the host dwelling is about 14 metres by 8 metres in footprint, so it's very close to the size of the proposed building. So what you have is two independent buildings, almost equal in size to each other. Although it's not connected to the main building, the applicant states it is ancillary, and in certain circumstances, yes, we do accept buildings that are not actually attached to the host building. However, it's the overall size, design of this proposal which will compete with the main dwelling and almost duplicate what is currently on the site, and as such doesn't fulfil the policy requirements. And it's principally for that reason that we are recommending refusal of the application. In addition to that ground of refusal, there's no information relating to biodiversity enhancements, and therefore the policy doesn't comply with DEV 26, and there is no information on carbon reduction measures. So it is also contrary to policy DEV 32. And that's principally what I'd like to say. Very happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smurden.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do actually know where this is. It's very hidden away, and it's right on the very extremities of South Hams. My question is around the caravan, which is shown. Could you enlarge the furthest one there, so that we can? So under what sort of is there permission? Don't worry, that's okay. Don't worry, that's all right. As long as that's fine, we can see it. It's not critical. So does the caravan have permission? Was that one granted as ancillary to the main dwelling? You know, and how long's it been on site? If we know, do we know any of those?
The short answer is I don't know how long it's been on site. It's been on site at least for 3 years, if not longer. There is no permission for the mobile home. Okay. And there's no indication that it's been lived in as an independent unit.
Right. Okay. So it's not claiming any, 4-year, permission or be open to Clwyd or anything like that.
Not currently.
No. Right. Thank you.
Just for clarity, the siting of a mobile home on land that doesn't change the use of that land does not require a planning permission. So if it's not being used as an independent unit, if it's just being used for additional bedrooms, for argument's sake, that would not require a planning permission. So please don't take that the caravan being there and not having a planning permission means that it's a breach of planning control. It probably isn't.
Thank you for that. Any further questions of the officer? No? Right. As you can see, we move straight to the ward member, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a slightly unusual application. As you can see by the number on it, it came through last year, and basically it has gone quiet. And I don't think anybody's made contact with us for some while over this. The agent was in contact with me before because he was concerned that it was being proposed for refusal, and and I talked to the officer at the time, not this officer, it's a different officer who was dealing with it at the time. And what was clear was there was concern about how it would be in the garden. But the argument from the agent was that this actually was a situation, a family situation, where, as far as I remember clearly, one person had been left in that the bungalow that's there, and this was another family member coming in to kind of live there to be a help. The person, if I remember correctly, also was disabled. I think the resident is disabled, which is why they need the ramp to get into this new building. So the idea of the new building would be to provide this other family member with somewhere as a working space, and the garden room would be a pleasant place for the current resident in the bungalow to live. The bungalow itself is small. I've just done a quick just adding up the figures of what's been given, which is that the application is 13 by 7 and the current bungalow is 14 by 8. So that's actually 81%. So it is over the 50% recommendation. Staverton Parish Council debated this quite closely at the time, and they decided that they were quite comfortable with it as long as it was clearly left as ancillary to the main building. And to be fair, sometimes family circumstances just require us to be a bit flexible. And I would think that given that this isn't intended to be a residential building, it is intended to be an extended use of the space that they have there. As has been said, it's not visible from around. And I just want you to understand that before I give my view on it, really, that what's going on here is slightly unusual. And, we are dealing with one building. The main building is very small. And I think that is something that should be borne in mind, because it's hard to sometimes build onto that. And also in terms of what the type of building that's proposed is quite different in terms of its materials. I mean, this is, as you can see from those photos, I would say probably 60s or 70s bungalow. So I'll leave it there.
So we go into the debate. Well, no doubt she will be questioned. Are there any questions? I didn't see anybody waving their arm at me, so no, none. Move into the debate. Councillor Brazil, yeah.
Actually, my question is possibly for the case officer. I'm sorry to have been so slow in bringing this up. I hope this is all right, but I just don't quite get the relationship between that photograph and the buildings on the site when we see them in plan view. And would you bear with me and just talk through that relationship?
I will bear with you, yes.
I'm sorry the plan's not slightly clearer, but I'll move my cursor to the position of the existing bungalow, which is this building here.
Yeah.
We've then got the double garage, which was approved by this council years ago, and then also an attached store building, which you can see in one of the photographs. So this is the proposed site of the ancillary accommodation. And just to get your bearings fully, this is the A384.
Yeah.
So you're actually driving past very close to the edge of
the photograph is taken from where the two trees are.
The photographs are taken from down here.
Oh, I'm with you.
Well, I'm confused.
Councillor Brazil.
Thank you. Look, I've got a lot of a lot of sympathy with it, because I can assure you that in my patch, what an applicant would do is knock down that bungalow and build a mansion there, and we'd go, "Oh, that's fine," because that's what happens, and it's absolutely ridiculous, but we allow it. And I can give plenty of examples of that. East Portlemouth being perhaps the best example. But that's not what they're doing. They're choosing to do an ancillary, and I'm afraid that it does break the 50% rule. And as such, I think we have to go with the officer recommendation. I think as far as the DEV 32 and the biodiversity are concerned, that's something that could be overcome. But with conditions, and we could get there. But I think in principle, because it's over the 50%, in fact, it's well over the 50% at 80%, I think we've got no choice but to refuse it. But as I say, I mean, it would be nice if when they knocked down and did a replacement dwelling, that we were so specific about how big the replacement dwelling can be, because we seem to be pretty lax on that. Anyway, so I will move the officer recommendation for refusal, as per the officer recommendation for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Brazil. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yeah, I'll second.
Right, Councillor Callan seconded it. Right, do you know we wish to talk to that? Anybody have anything to say about that? Yeah, Councillor Abbott.
So, is the ramp included in that 87%?
No. No, that's not the answer.
No. Oh.
If there's no other debate on this, I'm going to... Yes, Councillor Hodgson.
I just wanted to give other members a chance to say something before I said it. I mean, as far as I understand it, the purpose of the studio is for music. And the person who's been, who lives on their own at the moment in the house, as I say, the other family member coming to be there, I don't know, but I think he's perhaps a bit older and perhaps didn't want to be disturbed by a lot of music. In terms of the ecology, as you know, I'm pretty hot on this usually, but if you look at what's behind, it's the fence, and the other, as has been said, the other side of that fence is the A385. So it's the ecology is actually where we're standing here. It's further. It's this down behind us, where the photograph on the right is. It's down behind us is where the ecology is, and where the river comes through, the Dart. So I feel it's actually, as much as it's not perhaps everybody's first choice and how any of us individually would develop the site. I mean, the bit that's going to be removed, where you see the cars on that right-hand photo, as far as I understand it, that is where we're seeing that caravan there. That's where this building is going to go. So it's just going along from it. And if you look at the building on the photograph on the top left, you can see the position of it. So it will actually, I think it will read fairly closely as just as one piece. I mean, there'll be a bit of a division, but it's I just think I think it's acceptable. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's acceptable. And if it's meeting a local need, which I think it is in this case, then I'm prepared to actually support it. But obviously there's been a refusal proposed at the moment, so I won't go any further with that at this moment.
Right, thank you. So, if there's no further discussion on this, we are going for the vote as proposed by Councillor Brazil that we accept the officer's recommendation for refusal. Can I have a show of hands to that effect, please? Okay. Those against? Councillor Hodgson, one. Is that it? Okay, so yeah. So what was that? 11 for and 1 against. So that application of 31121 HHO at 1 Lee Mount, Beckersley has been refused. Next up is.
Give us 1 second.
Sorry, officer's got to change. I see that. We've got a new one coming in a minute. Okay, we're ready to go. This is application 3679, 22 Full, 92 High Street, Totnes. And I'm going to welcome Belle. This is her first presentation to us. Welcome. I hope that we treat you kindly. And would you like to present the first application, please?
Yeah, thank you. So this proposal is for the change of use of part of the shop on the ground floor and then the entire first and second floors to residential use. The officer recommendation is for conditional approval and it's been called to committee by one of the ward members due to lack of parking, unable to support town centre holiday accommodation during local housing crisis and over reduction of current retail unit. In terms of updates, there have been some minor alterations to the officer report following David Fairburn's comments, and these are more about sort of phrasing and they don't change the content or the recommendation. So the location is here, it's on the High Street and it's in the primary shopping area of Totnes. In terms of constraints, it's in a critical drainage area and it's in the Totnes conservation area and it's in an area with a high density of listed buildings, so they are the blue triangles and these are grade 2. So here we have various shots of the site and the existing and the proposed elevations. So there are minimal external alterations, so it's largely repair and replacement to match the existing materials, and the changes are predominantly focused on the roofscape. So here we have a roof patio area, so that's about half a square metre, and there's an artist's impression there as it's quite hard to take a photograph from the ground floor. In terms of the existing and the proposed floor plans, so you can note the alterations to the ground floor. So we've got the existing corridor, the change of use to create a bike and bin storage area and then connecting through to the stairwell. And the applicant has submitted, in the submitted information, said that this is a net reduction in usable ground floor area of 8%. So in terms of the policy context, in this location, in the Totnes town centre, proposals should maintain the vitality and viability of the centre, and the emerging neighbourhood plan seeks that ground floor space and frontages are predominantly remained in retail use. So the key issues for this application, we have the loss of retail space. So the applicant's submitted information explains that this is a reflection of the changing face of retail and that they intend to provide a hybrid offer. So they've retained a physical presence while responding to online trade. The ground floor space would remain predominantly in retail use and remain a viable commercial enterprise and space. And officers considered that this would not have an adverse impact on the retail offer and vitality of the town in general. So the proposed C3 residential use would include holiday accommodation, potentially. Objections have been raised to this potential holiday accommodation use. At present, there is no principal occupancy in the local plan or in the neighbourhood plan. So there's no planning policy justification for refusal on this basis at this time. This is a main town, it's a sustainable location, we have public transport, we have facilities, and this is where growth is generally directed and prioritised. So condition 5, the proposed condition 5 is to prevent the conversion of the ground floor bin and cycle storage area to habitable accommodation. And officers would note that if it were not for that ground floor change of use, this application would be permitted development. So the planning system generally accepts that upper floors can be converted. In terms of neighbour amenity, the creation of the roof space, so that's the about half a square metre, potentially could have neighbour amenity issues, but this is a tight-knit urban area and it is generally consistent with the level of amenity in the locality. And then we've got lack of outdoor amenity. So externally, the proposal doesn't meet the provision of 50 square metres per dwelling set out in the SPD. But there is a communal courtyard, so that's about 3.5 square metres, and there's connection to existing public spaces and community facilities nearby. So officers don't consider that they could justify a refusal on that basis. And then we move to lack of parking. So for a two-bedroom dwelling, the SPD would be looking at indicative parking provision for 2 spaces per dwelling, so 4 additional spaces. However, this is Totnes Town Centre. We have pedestrian links, we've got cycling links, we've got public transport, open spaces, local services and provisions in close proximity, and officers don't consider that we could justify a refusal on that basis. So to summarise, there are some policy conflicts. However, we don't feel in this location, in the centre of Totnes, that these would justify a refusal. So officers are recommending this for conditional approval.
Thank you very much. Members, questions? Councillor Abbott?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Could you, using the photographs, the drawings of the building, show me where there is retail at the moment and where the retail will remain?
So at present, it's set out where we have retail here on the...
Your cursor is not always... It's coming and going, is it? There. Okay. Yeah.
Trying to find the
Bottom left now.
I don't know where it's.
No.
Just move the cursor slowly.
Okay, sure.
Where are we?
So at the moment, the way that the building is, we've got sort of retail floor space on that ground floor, and then we've got storage on the first and second floor.
I don't know where you're.
The applicants could explain that probably better than I could.
Councillor, the plans are ground floor at the bottom,
good.
then first floor in the middle, then second floor at the top.
Right.
So the plans on the left, as I'm looking at them, are existing, and the plans on the right are proposed.
Good.
So in terms of the shop space, that would be the ground floor, but then you've got storage on the first and second floors.
Okay, and then on the new stuff, new picture, that's retained that retail spaces on the.
So, can you see where it's sort of coloured white on the proposed?
Yes.
That's the proposed retail.
Any further questions? Yeah, Councillor Smurden.
So there's effectively, from reading here, there's effectively 2 flats, 1 on each floor. So are they both available for holiday? Are they both proposed for holiday use, or?
So they're proposed for C3 residential use. So
right.
It's a potential.
So they can be. They could be, resident.
Could be, yeah.
Okay.
Short-term rentals, long-term rentals, full use.
Right.
Councillor Long, well, Councillor Smurden pondering that.
Just a question. You made the comment that it's indicated 8% usable ground floor space reduction, but there is an overall loss to the retail because obviously you've got storage there. So that's it's to say 8% is a bit disingenuous because you're obviously reducing any ability for storage. So the use of the shop area as such, retail area changes.
That's ground floor. The net loss total floor space as submitted an application for the
Thank you.
Okay.
Just for,
Yes, Mr. Weimer?
Just for clarity, as was mentioned in the presentation, anybody can convert floors above shops into residential accommodation without requiring planning permission. So I think that needs to be borne in mind.
Apologies, Chairman. I mean, it's been used for retail at present. Could we know what it sells? What they're selling at present? What is the retail?
So the applicant has submitted quite a sort of lengthy explanation of how it's used and how it's proposed to be used, and I think that question might be better directed to them.
Okay. Councillor Panel?
I'm just confused. I'm looking at a street view photograph of 92 High Street, and it seemed to be a two-storey building with a roof above. Is that right? Is the second floor in the roof?
Yes, it would be. So if I show you the proposed elevations, can you see the changes to the roofscape? So we have 4 conservation roof lights on the southwest elevation, and then on the rear elevation we've got some additional lead-faced dormers.
Yeah.
That's right. So, so the street from the high street, the view doesn't change, but at the back, there's windows inserted to provide a better environment for the top floor. Thank you.
Right. Any further questions? Yeah, Councillor Callan.
Yeah, in terms of the what the town council's saying in its neighbourhood, its emerging neighbourhood plan. So are we saying that the neighbourhood plan isn't tight enough there? And we're saying there's no primary residence, specifically suggesting that's what they should have said, because they're saying they want small housing units for local people and not holiday accommodation. They're saying where's the evidence of the need for holiday? So we're saying that that's not correct. We're saying that in the town, tourism is acceptable. So we seem to be saying the opposite thing to what the neighbourhood plan is saying.
Through you, Chair, I don't think we're saying that the neighbourhood plan is wrong. I think what we're just making a statement of fact that there isn't a policy in the neighbourhood plan in respect of principal residency condition. So I don't think that's necessarily wrong, because you normally to get that through an inspector, you'd normally have to demonstrate there is a significant number of an examiner. You'd have to demonstrate that there's a significant number of second homes, so you've got a justification for putting that condition on. So I don't think we're saying that the neighbourhood plan is wrong. I think it's just literally a statement of fact of saying this is what the policies are, but it wasn't a judgment. It wasn't meant. I don't see it as a judgment on the neighbourhood plan at all.
Right. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just clarify this thing about the loss of retail? Because the little proposal that's on the design and access statement suggested it's actually 25% of the ground floor is going to be lost to residential, and just 75% remains of the retail. And that would fit in with the loss of 200 square metres, if that's because it's 53 square metres is just being left for retail downstairs, and 18 square metres is being taken up by this residential change. Yeah, it's just that it was said to be 8% earlier, and I'm just.
But perhaps the question is best put to the speaker, who can clarify that.
I think that's the best way forward. Right. If there's no further questions of the officer, I'll call upon supporter, Mr. Richard Smith. Just settle yourself down, switch on the mic, and you have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm here to represent the applicants, who are experienced retailers having successfully operated small and medium scale businesses in the homeware, retail and cafe sectors. The applicants have relocated their business to Totnes after identifying and sharing the ethos of the town, its distinctive independent retail offer, underpinned by local, ethical and sustainable goods. Some of you may have visited Bond since it opened last summer on a temporary basis, whilst the family were relocating to Devon. Visitors to the shop will have experienced a warm welcome, attentive service and a temporary shopping experience since opening. Changes to the ground floor having already been made to open up the space, make it more welcoming and easier to navigate. The shop operates as a showroom complemented by online sales catalogue with deliveries made to customers from a warehouse in Buckfast Lee. Separating stock and back of house operations from the high street premises is more efficient for the business and it prevents regularly blocking up the high street with bulky deliveries. The shops at the top of town are predominantly 18th and 19th century buildings, constrained by the domestic scale of their time. Number 92 was a domestic dwelling until the early 20th century shop front was added. This typology makes for compact shops and it's typical to see residential use on the upper floors. The changes proposed seek to minimise the loss of trading space. The net reduction in shop area is 8% at ground floor when compared with the previous Harris and Son layout. The overall shop will occupy 75% of the ground floor space, with the remaining 25% set aside for residential service and access use. The proposed ground floor shop area is 53 square metres. Some may feel this is too small to operate effectively, but comparison would say otherwise. We have studied 27 neighbouring businesses at the top of town from 75 to 101 High Street. The average shop at the top of town operates with 50 square metres of space. In fact, the majority of businesses, 52%, operate with 46 square metres or less. This will make Bonds, 92 High Street, slightly larger than the average and bigger than the majority. The context analysis justifies a smaller shop, confirming that the changes proposed are a proportionate response to the scale of the average shop at the top of town. Most importantly, the applicants feel this is the right thing to do to make their business operate efficiently. Giving Bonds a head start to allow it to trade effectively for the long term so that it can remain agile and sustain pressures facing the high street and changes from our shopping habits. The sustainable location, neighbourhood plan and wider planning policy support the residential changes to the upper floors with pre-app support for the lack of dedicated on-site amenity and vehicle parking. Thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions, and I've got a short handout which gives the context for the analysis of the 27 units if it was applicable.
Yeah, we can't take any handouts, I'm afraid. Coach Hodgson, will you the question you were asking? Do you think it's been answered?
Well, not really, because it's clear in the DNA statement that it's 75% retail, 25% residential on the ground floor. That shop was a two-storey retail unit. It was a very active shop, a hardware shop, as I'm sure everybody knows. But this has been a critical issue that's been raised at the town council about the loss of any retail. And while I understand the sort of comparison with the other shops in the Narrows, which are small, by their very nature, and some of them going back to very ancient times in terms of the layout and the area, I think this is one of the key concerns. But secondly, the actual accommodation meeting whether that meets the actual housing needs, and that's my question to you: is does it meet housing needs, in the local area?
So there's a couple of questions there. To the housing needs side, ultimately, these are two bedroom domestic dwellings that meet technical housing standards, and they would comply as new housing units within the town centre. So ultimately, they will meet an existing need. We'd expect the existing need from the 2016 housing needs survey to be already being met through 5-year housing land supply, which is what we're often told when we bring applications forward for new residential in unsustainable areas. So Totnes already has an allocation for delivering new homes within the Totnes boundary. So like the Atmos site, for example, which we would consider possibly the houses with dedicated amenity space and access for space for gardens, space for parking, space for the more contextual residential amenity to be appropriate. This is a town centre use, and it's not an unrestricted residential use that we're proposing. What we've identified is the applicants wish to keep this building under one use. They wish to keep the whole building together in terms of its ownership, but recognise that from a trading point, from a shop point of view, trading over 3 floors isn't necessary in terms of and more than it not being necessary, it actually isn't efficient. So by bringing goods into Totnes High Street and then distributing them out again is less efficient than having a showroom type premises, shop premises, which can function independently for a number of operators in terms of its size and scale, and it's shown that it's contextually appropriate. But it's no longer key to have a big bricks and mortar presence over 3 floors just to keep stock, to keep an accountant, bookkeeper, and all the back of house office facilities that one would need. That accommodation is actually more efficiently used to support the business with some income from letting, whether it be short term, long term, or occupy, whether they choose to occupy it themselves.
Could I just ask one extra question? Where would the people now expect people to park if they need to bring a car and use a car?
So much like the shop use, so the shop had 4 or 5 staff that didn't live above the shop. So those staff were coming into the Totnes town centre, arguably, and parking within the town. So if we're talking about the net loss of parking, there's no parking to sort of take away. There's no parking allocation for the site in terms of its existing use. So if we look at its proposed use, it's still a shop area with a reduced number of staff within that shop, because a single person can man that single story shop area. So the actual staffing demand we see is reduced. Therefore, the net balance of allocation that already would have been taken up within the town from public car parking, on-street parking, cycles, people travelling to work, whatever, there's no direct consequence either way. It's just, it will be the occupants of the dwellings, be they long-term, short-term, holiday makers, will use the infrastructure that's available within the town.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Panel?
Am I right in thinking that a lot of the Elizabethan buildings, Tudor buildings down High Street and 4th Street did have or do have residential accommodation above them historically?
It appears so, but we've done a review of the business. We've got these figures from a business rates analysis from the Valuation Office Agency website, which also lists council tax bandings and council tax allocations in the same area. We didn't do a comparison with the number of dwellings, but anecdotally from that analysis, I would say there's a high percentage of properties in the same stretch, which would identify as probably properties above shops, but we didn't do that analysis for this bit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. Can I ask, is this a shop premises, the former premises of Harris, the Ironmongers, W.H. Harris and Sons Ironmongers, which was probably established in about 1900?
So from our analysis, we saw that Harris and Sons ran for about 130 years.
That's right.
And traded from this property over 3 floors.
Yes. I remember it well, so I knew the shop very well indeed, because you could buy anything from a tin of pins to, if you're on a farm milking machine, whatever, to service lots and lots of industries. And of course now with people shopping in different ways. Yes, right, thank you.
Councillor Smurden?
Yes. Could you just clarify what the business sells?
It's a homewares business, so from candles and magazine racks to coffee tables and stools and sofas and bed linens, carpets, rugs.
Right. Okay, fair enough.
Right, thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately, the next speaker's had to leave, but she's left a thing with, she's asked Amelia to read out a statement in place of, which I'm quite happy to do. So Amelia, would you like to read? Thank you.
Right, so this is a statement from Councillor Georgina Allen. The concerns raised by the Planning Committee of the Town Council mostly deal with the reduction of retail space and the designation of space above the shop as holiday flats. We note the comments made by Rich Smith of Hand Drawn Homes relating to the concerns of the Planning Committee, and I'd like to answer those specifically. He mentions the neighbourhood plan as a setting out a vision for a vibrant and thriving town centre as justification for supporting holiday flats. The draft neighbourhood plan clearly states our desire to support residential provision for smaller units for young people and for family homes. We would see the potential to create a residential home above the retail space at number 92 rather than holiday flats is more in line with the stated aims and aspirations of the draft neighbourhood plan. Mr. Smith cites the closure of the previous shop, Harris and Sons, as being due to the outdated and failing business model of previous owners. Members of the committee had discussed the reasons for closing the much-loved local shop with the owners, and we were of the understanding that it was due to retirement. Our concerns are around the diminished size of retail space, which would turn the premises into a shop front, a window dressing more than as a functioning shop, which would mean going forward that the space would no longer be viable for any future businesses and that the high street could lose this space as potential viable business. We would like clarification as to whether the fact that the proposals for upstairs fall short of the minimum private amenity space policy means that they can only provide short-term holiday lets, as the flats will be too small to rent successfully as residential. The model of Totnes, which has bucked the national trend for high streets, is for retail areas downstairs and often residential upstairs, which means that the town centre is lived in and vibrant. We have been noted in publications such as Marmot Report as having what is known as a healthy high street due to the proliferation of small businesses alongside residences. However, unfortunately, recently we have seen workers priced out of the town centre and having to relocate to Torbay or other cheaper areas, and then having to commute into work, causing more congestion. Small flats on the high street would support a sustainable travel plan and need to recruit locally. Mr. Smith argues that visitors can come by train and so have no need of a car parking spaces, but I would like to see evidence of that. Our understanding is the vast majority of visitors arrive by car and need a parking space, which is often a problem in town in the summer. This has been made worse recently due to the loss of car parking space in the Brutus Centre. The Town Council would like to see the top part of 92 High Street being converted into residential flats, which would serve the town much more than holiday flats, and to support the long-term viability of retail area to be maintained. We do not want to see the high street suffer from what is known locally as dark windows, flats left empty in the winter. We welcome what seems to be a very sensible approach to the material changes made in the conversion otherwise. Mr. Smith also raises the question of wording of the Town Council's objection as creating holiday retail units. I'm informed by our officer that is a typo, so apologise. It should read rental units. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we'll be asking you questions. There was one or two questions in there we can't answer either. Councillor Sweet, would you like to do your bit as ward member, please?
My understanding is that the application is for holiday accommodation. There's a lot of talk about primary residence currently within the council. While we don't have this currently enshrined in the draft neighbourhood plan, I would hate holiday accommodation to be an issue beyond 21% before we acted. Incidentally, there were 800 objections made against the application for holiday accommodation to be built down at the Dairy Crest ex-Atmos site. Although this is a much smaller application, the principle and feeling is still the same. The neighbourhood plan overwhelmingly supports local businesses, a thriving town centre. The current Bonds business, I believe, is just open 3 days a week. The Narrows area at the top of Totnes High Street has never been, to my knowledge, more sought after for retail units. There's not been any empty shops there since way before COVID, and a fair few new businesses have opened since 2020. 3 recently have moved from smaller units into much larger shops, 2 of which being a cafe and a vintage shop, which will not be relying on online sales. The previous owners of 92 Harris has retired. There is a substantial need for retail and business space in Totnes, especially in the Narrows area. Totnes is a market town thriving, as South Hampstead well knows, running the weekly markets. And the Narrows has its own social media pages and promotion pages in Visit Totnes. I cannot support the officer's report regarding changing times of retail and online offering. And if that were true, and there were a need for an online element at 92, there would need to be a decent space for storage and order processing. The paragraph in the design statement is contradictory as it alludes to a saving being made by buying, renting a processing space elsewhere. Therefore, I think that application is in contradiction with Dev 18 and 17. In addition, it compromises business space for local enterprise and employment. Just last week, somebody in Totnes was looking for a unit for their dried flower business, for example. Many non-residential upper floors of High Street and 4th Street are used for workshops, therapy rooms, office spaces. A conversion for holiday lets does not fit the current economic climate in Totnes, which always bucks the national trends, as it's an all year round destination shopping, supporting locals, day visitors and tourism. There's currently a residential letting a few doors down from number 92, a 4-bedroom house above a shop for £900 a month. While a long way from what I would consider to be affordable housing, it is nevertheless a home for a local family or a house share. So there is decent money to be made from residential lettings. If perhaps just one floor was being converted to residential, I would feel more positive towards the application. The lack of parking is concerning. While I appreciate the bicycle storage, I don't believe tourists stay at the top of the hill in Totnes High Street to use bicycles as their main mode of transport. I think the majority of people would use cars. There's no parking here, so would the applicant be looking to buy residential parking permits? This would take up vital parking spaces for shoppers. Sadly, our local Totnes bus services have actually recently been reduced, and we're constantly hearing about rail service cuts, not expansion. I think this application is a big step in the wrong direction as it goes against the things that this council and councillors have continuously said they support, i.e. affordable housing, local business, retail, local jobs and local homes for local people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? You're not going to get away with it. Any questions of the ward member?
Just one, if this was residential accommodation, they would still need parking and they'd still take up the same amount of car parking space, wouldn't they?
Possibly, but they might be working within the town centre rather than 2 cars, 3 cars coming and going, doubling up on residential permits.
Okay, anybody else? Right, thank you very much. So we're now into the debate. Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, Chairman, I just wondered, there was a comment that came up from Georgina about the fact that the living space being provided was not acceptable for residential but would be for holiday. Is there any truth in that, or could I just have an explanation from the planning officer, please?
Yeah.
Yes. So the internal accommodation for both of the flats meets the national space standards for residential accommodation and storage. It meets all of that. What it doesn't meet is the SQ, so the supplementary plan document, where we set out what we would like to see on outdoor amenity space. It doesn't meet that, but it meets the internal space set up.
Please.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Also, a question of clarification, please. So, if these were converted to residential, then they could be holiday lets. Is there a specific designation of holiday flats? So, what may be getting to people is the idea that they're going to go out to be holiday lets, but they could just be let. And then.
Yeah, Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, just to follow on from that point, whereas I have some sympathy, the thing is we don't have a principal residency policy within Totnes, and therefore any house in Totnes can be let out. The 4-bedroom house that Joe talked about could easily be let out as Airbnb. If it's a new owner, they may choose to do that. So I think it's a red herring to talk about residential holiday lets. This is for a C3 residential use. How they use it for, we can't control because we don't have a principal residency. It may be that at a later date we decide to bring in that principal residency, but we don't have it at the moment. So in order to try and refuse it on the grounds that it might be holiday lets, is a false dawn, and you know, do not go down that. I recommend that we do not go down that particular route. What we do know is, as Pat said, that that it is permitted development to turn first and second floor accommodation above shops into residential without planning permission. So we don't actually have any control over the fact that that used to be retail, but it's not going to be anymore. And therefore, I think, again, be very careful about refusing it on those grounds, because as we've heard, that they've got permitted development rights there. The transport issue, I do have a lot of sympathy with that, but I've come across it myself in Kingsbridge as well. The fact of the matter is that inspectors look at the transport and they say, if you live in a sustainable area, then yes, it is possible for someone to arrive by train and use a bicycle. Obviously, they're not going to, and obviously they're going to arrive by car, but that's not how they look at it. And you know, the truth is that actually they are going to have to park some distance from this accommodation. So that maybe in that sense it does encourage them to arrive in a more sustainable form of transport. But again, I think that would be a very iffy route to go down if we were to refuse it on car parking, because we've had this argument about applications in Kingsbridge, which I haven't been to. I think that the main thing about this is there is definitely a loss of some retail space or storage space, however you want to look at it, on the ground floor, and whether we feel that that is big enough for us to recommend refusal or not. I have to say, I thought that the agent made a very good case about the size of the retail shops in and around that area, saying that actually the 50 plus square meters is actually above the average. Now, I think in an ideal world, we'd like to keep it exactly as it is. But whether the loss of that retail space, that 25, in a prime shopping area, it should be added, is large enough for us to refuse it, is, I think that's the grounds that one could do it on. And as much as it pains me, I don't think that is enough. And as a result, I would propose approval as per the officer recommendation. Thank you,
Thank you, Councillor Brazil. Do I have a second? Councillor Rowe seconded that.
Can I speak now?
Yeah, assuming you seconded, you speak first, and then Councillor Hodgson speak
Oh,
after.
sorry.
No.
Sorry if I jumped the gun on you, Jackie.
No,
Yes.
you seconded it, so you can speak to it.
Okay, right. Yes, well, I agree with what Julian says, and I'm afraid we've got to about move with the times. But as we've been saying, I think all morning, that with the onset of COVID, and we had to cope with that, and where we are now, that everything has changed. I've always shopped in Totnes, and I always say if I can't get it in Totnes, I don't have it, because we have a really good selection of shops there. And unfortunately, we lost the Ironmongers, and that was an excellent shop, but they're moving on. And I expect that the shop there was lived in upstairs many years ago, when those shops first became. People would have lived over the shop, and maybe we will be going back to that in some cases. Certainly not in this case, it would appear. I think it's a shame if it is holiday lets and not residential, but we can't control that. But I'm happy to second the recommendation of approval.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the bottom right illustration there, that pink bit, which takes the door out onto the street and also leads to the yard at the back. If I remember correctly, I think that yard at the back was also part of the retail space, because what it was used for was storing the bins out the back, and then the door access onto the street was used to bring the bins out. I've looked at the online proposals, and I can't see that, apart from the very front door, they have actually got access onto the street to put the bins out. Now, maybe they like bringing the bins through the shop. I don't know. Not many retail units do. But one of the issues that is a real problem in Totnes at the moment, and it's something we haven't been able to do anything about because it falls between Southampton and Devon County Council, is the use of commercial bins stored on the street. And now, those of us who know Bank Lane, which is right down the other end of Totnes, there's at least, well, there was 5, I think it's down to 4 now, of those huge, big storage bins that one of the commercial operators insists on the various shops they're using. So WH Smith's got one, there's a pharmacy that's got one, and it's all because they haven't actually got access onto the street. They just use the outside street for their waste storage. Now, I wonder how this is going to function for that. I don't know if that's something I should have perhaps asked earlier, but I'm concerned about whether we're going to get, in that very narrow road, Leachwell Lane, whether we're going to get a thundering great commercial bin to deal with the commercial waste coming out of the shop, because, okay, maybe they're doing online sales, but if they're doing coffees, they're going to have some kind of waste. And I just think that that's something we should bear in mind as to why people have these larger retail areas down below. They're not all necessarily the shop front, they're actually the functioning part to support the retail services. So I just, actually, that was really, if you don't mind, but I have a question about how the waste bins or waste is going to be handled in this retail unit if they're losing that outside access from the back.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the answer at this time.
Okay, question asked. Is there any other, right, if there's no other debate on this, we will go to the vote as per Councillor Brazil proposed and Councillor Rowe seconded that we accept the opposite's recommendation. There wasn't any conditions mentioned in the debate, so you happy?
The conditions are on the report.
Yeah, well, the conditions.
I'm not aware of there's been any added conditions.
No added conditions for them. Right, so.
I suggest then a condition based on what I was just saying, that actually there should not be no use of the outside space for commercial waste bins to be stored on the street. Because that's the problem we've got in Bank Lane. They're just left there day in, day out.
I think we could certainly put a condition on asking for details of how refuse is going to be dealt with. I don't think as an authority we can say you can't put a waste bin on the street, because I think that's beyond our control, but we can certainly ask for details of how it is going to be done. The applicants are here, they're clearly hearing that there is a concern about having, I'm assuming it's the larger 4-wheeled curvy roofed big bins. So yeah,
I'm referring to a stored on the street because there's no space inside or
I'm
access to bring them out.
I'm comfortable that you members could impose a condition asking for details of a detailed plan of how refuse is going to be dealt with and where the bins are going to be stored, and we can deal with it with that condition.
Well,
yes, proposal. I'm very happy to accept that condition.
Yeah.
Yeah, but is that sort of enforceable in the sense, because environmental health here, say for the ones in Bank Lane, there's nothing they can do about it, although it's actually an environmental health problem, and Devon County Council say it's not causing an obstruction, but here it would be.
You hear what Weimer has said.
I think there will be a difference between the ones that are presumably in existence that are with shops that have been there for a long time, haven't had any planning permission, so therefore there's no planning condition. Whereas the difference here is we're asking for a scheme. If they don't then comply with the scheme, it's not an environmental health matter, it's not a county matter, it's a planning enforcement matter for non-compliance with the planning condition. So the fact that there's a condition there does give that added level of enforceability that wouldn't be there for the other examples of the 4 bins you're referring to.
Okay, so we're clear what we're going to the vote on as per the officer's recommendation with that one added condition to the other conditions. Can I have a show of hands, all those in favour, please? Nine, yes. Those against? 2 against. Abstention? 1 abstention. So that application 3679 22 Fold 92 High Street, Totnes, has been approved. Right, we've now got the Final application, 3985 22 full Squares Quay Car Park, Kingsbridge. I won't go into any more description than that. Belle, can you give us a brief synopsis of what the application is about, please?
So the proposal is for the temporary change of use of the land for the siting of 2 containers for a paddleboarding school. The officer recommendation is for conditional approval with a condition which is a sort of 2-year consent which coincides with the lease. And the reason it's been called to committee is because it is land owned by South Hams District Council. We have received 47 letters of representation to this application, and there is public interest in the application. In terms of updates, the Harbour Master for Kingsbridge has confirmed that they have no objections. So the location is the car park along the quay. The site is at the far end and it's at the top of the slipway, and it would cover approximately 9 car parking spaces. In terms of constraints, it's in the South Devon area of outstanding natural beauty. It's in flood zone 2-3 and critical drainage area, and there is a grade 2 listed war memorial on the other side of the water. So we have various shots of the site, so draw your attention to the slipway there, and then this bottom photograph in the corner is from the other side of the water. In terms of the proposed plan and elevations, so we've got 2 shipping containers, so these are 6 metres by approximately 6 metres by 2.5 metres. They're positioned 4 metres apart, and they would be enclosed by planters. There's horizontal timber cladding, and there would be no external illumination, and they would be used for storage and for office space. So just as a note, along the quay we've got various examples of street furniture, and on the other side of the water we have got similar sort of scale and character structures. If you note the timber cladding, and we have got a planter already on site. So in terms of the policy context, Kingsbridge is a main town where we're looking to support the economy for appropriate measures to support the economy, and the neighbourhood plan does offer support for estuary and water-based leisure activities. It is an established business that would likely attract people to the area and could benefit the local economy. So in terms of the key issues, there is the visual impact. So whilst it's a shipping container, this timber cladding is generally in keeping with the other sort of street furniture. And this is a temporary consent. There's impact on the car park, so concerns have been raised about associated paraphernalia not being confined to the site boundary. The applicant has explained that this would be supervised, and again we would stress that it is a temporary consent, so if there are concerns that arise this can be monitored, and we don't consider that we could justify a refusal on this basis. There's the loss of approximately 9 car parking spaces, and this could be exacerbated by increased traffic to the paddleboarding business, but the car park would retain over 200 spaces, and again it's a temporary consent, so this could be monitored, and we don't consider we could justify a refusal on that basis. There could be potential conflict between paddleboarders, road users, slipway users, water users. Again, the applicant has submitted information about supervising. We've not received objections from the specialist consultees on this. And again, it is a temporary consent, so it could be monitored, and we don't consider we could justify a refusal on that basis. I was thinking, we have got attendants here who can sort of answer questions on that. And then we've got we've received concerns regarding a proposed enlargement of the skate park on the other part of the car park. At this stage, they are early plans. There's no live planning application, so it's not a material planning consideration at this stage. And again, it is a temporary consent, so that could be monitored and potentially addressed in the future. Again, flood zone 2-3 in the critical drainage area, so it's not for habitable accommodation. The submitted sequential test explains how the nature of the business requires a waterside location, so it couldn't reasonably be located elsewhere in an area with the lower risk of flooding, and it is a compatible water use, so the exceptions test is not required. So to summarise, given the nature of the proposal, it is considered to be an appropriate location for this development that could bring economic benefits to the area, and this is a temporary consent, so any concerns could be monitored, and ultimately officers considered that the benefits would outweigh the harm in the planning balance, and we would be recommending that for conditional approval. So again, that is with a condition that is connected to the lease.
Thank you very much. Questions, members? No? All right, so we'll call upon Crispin, please. You've seen how it works this morning. Sit down, settle yourself in. You've got 3 minutes, okay?
Good afternoon. Thank you for your consideration. I am looking to relocate my established business and remain in Kingsbridge, which has over 12 years of safe and reliable expertise for paddleboarding on the Salcombe Kingsbridge estuary. We already have permission from the South Hams District Council to operate from the proposed location, but need a suitable storage space with facilities such as an office and changing rooms to offer the standard of service expected and to keep the business viable to operate. The business has been operating since 2011 and has seen thousands of customers safely enjoy SUP on the estuary. We are a British SUP Association school and examiner centre, a wildlife safe operator through the WISE scheme, and Red Paddoco Centre of Excellence, the only one in the UK. We are current national SUP club champions and the longest to have ever held that accolade. Our flagship event, SUP the Creek, is also the highest rated UK event on the SUP World Rankings, excluding the Euro Tour event. The site has been carefully considered to provide facilities needed to offer our leading services within a small area. The exterior racking allows us to utilise the storage container as a teaching room or additional changing space for busier days. The exterior of the site is barried by the 2 existing walls on 2 sides and planters with flags to offer a clear and safe movement board for clients and staff from the car park. The space between the containers becoming a natural briefing zone before sessions commence. We will need to get to and from the water with clients and kit and have the rights to use the public sickbay for commercial purposes as per our licence from the South Hams District Council. Hire groups are given a safety briefing and also informed not to block any public access. Staff will be expected to help maintain the standard as much as humanly possible. Having grown up in Salcombe and worked on and around the estuary my whole life, I have a deep respect for how the estuary works and how it is accessed by everyone. We work alongside local companies daily and have a good rapport with local and visiting water users. We have been liaising with the skate park as well as the Harbour Authority and Town Council to ensure that the relocation fits with existing and future plans in this neglected area of Kingsbridge. We have no negative effect on the skate park, quite the opposite, making a board sports and fitness hub in conjunction with the nearby sports centre. A car park survey undertaken by the Town Council in August 21 clearly shows ample parking availability throughout the summer, especially at the slipway end furthest from the town. Our efforts to ensure the estuary and ANOB remain special and looked after is to continue to organise paddle and pick sessions to collect rubbish washed up on our shoreline. This provides valuable education for school groups as well as the public. Waterbourne is your asset. It operates to the highest standards and offers Kingsbridge and indeed the UK elite sporting events, increased tourism and local employment. It is known across the paddleboarding world and supports and nourishes local paddlers to international levels. It also aids the local community by reducing the strain on the NHS and providing excellent mental health and fitness benefits. We are asking for storage for 2 containers on a car parking space to continue operating. I hope you can see the enormous benefits this brings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, questions? No? Right, thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Councillor Johnson.
I just wanted to ask really how many clients you expect to be serving over the period of a month or in the summer, or have you kind of done any rough estimates like that?
So as you can appreciate, in the busier summer months, the main summer holidays, it's a much bigger scale than it is, say, in the winter over the last couple of months that we've had. In peak summer, you're looking probably about 60 people a day.
Any other questions? No? Right. Thank you very much. Councillor O'Callaghan, ward member.
Thank you. I think Crispin deserves an award for sitting patiently for over 3 hours. Just to say, you know, totally support this. Both ward members support this. The town council supports this. It's being recommended for approval. It's on district council land, which is why it's come. But Crispin wanted to obviously make sure that everything is goes for him at committee. But I'm totally in support. It's a successful, award-winning business. I myself have seen some stand-up paddleboarders having a competition at the quay down the rear. It looks great. It was colourful, brings the whole place to life. It's exactly what we need down on the quay, exactly the sort of thing that does no harm to the environment, as I say, helps the environment, attracts visitors, attracts footfall to the town, will help other businesses in the town. A wholly positive thing, I think. This is temporary permission, as has been said by Bell, and it's hoped it will eventually dovetail into the new skate park that we're hoping will be built and is being funded, crowdfunded and generally funded at the moment, because the existing one in the same spot down the quay isn't fit for purpose. So that will be a great thing for young people in the town, a demographic which is all too often overlooked, and generally will bring this section of the town to life. So well done to Crispin, and an excellent thing.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose conditional approval in accordance with the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Have I have a seconder? Councillor Taylor has seconded that. Okay. Do we want to discuss it any further? Mr. Hodgson?
Just to say that I personally really welcome this, and I think it's really good to see this coming in, and it's really important type of activities that we need to revitalise a lot of our miserable car parks.
Right. So we got the recommendation as per the proposal, a seconder as per the recommendation. So can I have a show of hands for all those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. The next question I'm going to ask, and this is tongue in cheek, how many of you have paddleboarded?
I have.
Come on. Come on. Come on. It's good fun, really is. Right. I think we can do this by about 1:30. We should have finished. Mr. Weinberg can do his PIs and.
PIs?
No, not PIs. Sorry. Planning appeals. Wrong word. That gave me wind. That put the wind up, didn't it? Right. Okay.
That gave you palpitations. Okay, I suspect the next committee is going to have more appeal decisions, because there seems to have been quite a few come through over the last the time after this the agenda was published. So there are as you know, there's quite a few appeals where they've been submitted. There's less appeals in terms of decisions. So I'll go through them very quickly. The first one is 3 Elson Cottages, Churchstowe. That application was extensions to a dwelling. It's the end of a terrace. The officers felt that it was firstly, the terrace itself was a non-designated heritage asset, and that the level of extensions caused harm to the character appearance of the dwelling and the surrounding area. The inspector agreed that that was the key issue, but considered that actually it wasn't overly visible. It replaced some other not great extensions, and overall considered the development to be an appropriate scale, form and design. I have looked at the photographs and proposed plans, and personally, I don't agree with the inspector, but I can see. I can see the argument, but I just don't personally agree. I do think, particularly that the extension, it's just out. To my mind, it's just out of kilter with that terrace. But we'll just take that. We're not going to change how we're dealing with similar applications. I think this is I'm going to take this as a one-off from a particular inspector. So that is the just for members. And when we do lose appeals, I'm going to try and bring some photographs and plans back out. So that's as it is at the moment. And as you can see, there's quite a substantial extension to both sides, and I just thought it was too. We just felt it was too much. And my suspicion is, if it came to members, I think that probably would have been the view as well. But we'll. Unfortunate. The second one is 52 Creekside Road, Nosmayo. This was relatively straightforward in that it was the removal of a wall to provide a car parking space. I thought this one could go either way with the inspector because there are a number of locations in that area where walls have been taken away for parking. So it was very pleasing that the inspector took a step back and said, okay, the conservation area is characterised by closely arranged residential development. Some of the walls have been removed, but not all of them. But the remaining walls maintain the overall visual continuity, retain a clear defining presence, and there shouldn't be any more, effectively, there shouldn't be any more loss. And the loss would have harm, albeit less than substantial harm on the setting of the listed building in the conservation area, but the public benefit would not outweigh that harm, therefore it was refused. For my mind, that's a really pleasing decision because on the face of it, it could have gone either way. And the last one is 24 Court Park, Thurleston. The application was for demolition of a deck and a garage, and then replaced with a two-story extension to the rear, an extended deck, a double garage, and a new side entrance. So the usual less is more in Thurleston application. The main issue was the effect on the character and appearance of the area and neighbour amenity. The inspector said that the various elements of the proposal would each alter the external appearance. There was no obvious unifying design concept that would successfully knit all the different components together, and the result would be an assortment of differing forms, detailed materials, and that lack of coherence would appear discordant. I think that was in about the third or fourth paragraph of the letter, so you didn't really need to go too much to the conclusion to see where that was going. So concluded that it was harmful to the character and appearance of the area. I think the interesting here was the inspector went into quite a lot of detail in terms of the proposed the extensions and the balcony or deck, to come to the conclusion that actually it didn't have enough impact on the neighbours. It was far enough away so there wasn't noise, and there was still a sufficient degree of privacy. So they concluded that it would provide for satisfactory daylight, sunlight, outlet, privacy, and protection for existing residents, and what would not have an unacceptable impact on neighbours. I'm not sure whether every inspector would have come to that view, but it's quite clear that it was really carefully considered and looked at where the windows were, what the distances were, where the windows looked at. And my feeling is that it took the view that the main windows of the neighbour had this really good view, so they wouldn't then be affected by what's next door because they're not looking next door, they're looking straight out of the view. And I think that's actually a fair decision. And I think it's very pleasing that the overall scale, mass, design, materials, it felt like it was lots of individual extensions that didn't. There was no overall cohesive design behind it. So again, quite a pleasing decision. And from what I've seen in the last couple of weeks, I think most of the decisions we've had in the last few weeks have also been appeals refused. So we did go through a few household in particular from 2 or 3 inspectors, but I think it's got back onto a more safer footing. I'll happily answer any questions, but that's the appeals.
No, right, move on then.
And it's the usual. The undetermined majors are there. I'm not going to do a presentation. If there's any questions, let me know. I'm anticipating a couple, but we'll see where we go.
Councillor Hodgson, I knew this was coming.
I think it might be your best interest to write directly to the parish council. I have raised it a couple of times, as you know, and it was going to be this, that and the other, and then they keep running out of time at the meeting. So I think if it came from our own planning authority, it might be a little bit more persuasive.
I left a little bit of time just in case they were going to write to me. That's gone. I will ensure that before the next. I will ensure that a letter has gone, certainly by the end of next week, to them and on that one.
I have the usual one on the 2 Frogmore ones. As I understand, it's next on the list. I'll let you come, or do you want to? Right. One has been given plan permission, but there's a lot of gripe about the actual work programme, early start. I had a go at. I mentioned it to Jack, and she was going to look at it. Whether she's mentioned it to you or not.
Okay, that wasn't the question I was anticipating. I thought the 2 Frogmore ones had been effectively completed.
Yeah, they have, but the problem is that the parish council is bending my ear because they could start 7:30 in the morning, and they explicitly said a long time ago that there was young children where they were going through. So I did email Jack. I have mentioned to Jack when you were on your halls. So.
Sorry, Councillor. I thought those developments had been completed.
They have, but
so if they've been,
No, they haven't. There's a new one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think that's these ones, is it? Because these ones are with the
these ones here.
These ones were the retrospective ones where they'd gone onto land they didn't own and it's taken. So it's not. So it's the more recent one and not these two. Okay. I'll speak to.
Yeah.
No, I understand. I'll have a conversation with Jack.
Councillor Abbott, sorry.
I just want to confirm that even the comments in red are in the public domain.
Yes, this is a published document.
Yeah. Any more for any more? You did it. You're just a minute out, Mr. Wyman. That's great. Thank you for your patience this morning. I was getting a little bit of earache about trying to get it all in before lunch, but I think it was worth doing that because we'd had an hour's lunch and then come back, we'd have been here a lot later this afternoon. Okay, so I thank you for your patience and attendance and declare the meeting closed.